Hey guys, tonight, we're kicking off with something a little darker. So dim the lights, maybe switch on a fan, get cozy. Actually scratch cozy. You'll want to savor comfort while it lasts. Because where we're going, comfort packed up and left months ago, if it ever visited at all. Picture this. You're waking up in a Viking raid camp, in the dead of winter, 871 CE, somewhere in what's now northern England. And your alarm clock is the stabbing ache of your ribs pressed against frozen ground, not the gentle chiming of your smartphone. Your first coherent thought isn't about coffee or emails, or hitting snooze for a few more precious minutes. It's the bitter realization that your blanket is just a rough patchwork of poorly tanned animal hides crusted with frost. The smell hits you next, something between mildew-damp straw and the body odor of 30 or so warriors who've clearly abandoned all pretense of hygiene. You sit up slowly, every joint protesting like rusted hinges, your breath steaming visibly in front of your face, thick as smoke signals trying to warn you to run far away. But there's nowhere to run. The tent flaps flap mockingly open, allowing gusts of cold air to slap you awake like a wintry insult to injury, reminding you that walls here are purely decorative, not protective. Around you, fellow warriors grunt and curse their own frozen limbs awake, scratching at lice in their tangled beards, as if performing some twisted Viking morning meditation ritual. You realize your own beard has collected a few new inhabitants overnight, itching incessantly as tiny legs dance over your chilled skin. But lice, my friend, are the least of your problems this morning. You stumble toward what passes for the doorway, pushing through warriors, already arguing bitterly about whose turn it is to scrape ice from the latrine trench. Outside the camp sprawls bleakly across a landscape painted entirely in shades of grey and brown mud. Ice-leafless trees twisted like tortured souls, and a low-hanging sky that promises more snow to bury your misery deeper. It's not the sort of scene you snap for your Instagram stories, unless your followers have a disturbing fascination with existential dread. Nearby, a few exhausted thralls stir a giant iron pot filled with what they optimistically call porridge. But in reality, it's a gloopy, grainy substance that could double as wallpaper paste or cement depending on your immediate construction needs. And as you stare mournfully into the grey slop, you're expected to eat. You wonder if nutritional guidelines apply here, or if protein simply means whatever insects happen to drown in it overnight. Still, you have no choice but to shovel it into your mouth, gagging slightly at the sour, gritty texture, knowing full well your body needs the energy if you're going to survive even one more miserable hour in this frozen purgatory. You glance up from the bowl, your stomach already churning rebelliously, and spot your commander, an impossibly large Viking, whose fur cloak looks suspiciously warmer and cleaner than your own barking orders at thralls and warriors alike. His voice sharp enough to cut through your lingering morning fog of despair. He looks angry. Of course he does. Vikings rarely look anything but angry, and as he strides towards you with grim purpose etched across his wind-chapped face, you feel a shiver run down your spine that has nothing to do with the cold. If you thought waking up was bad, wait until you see what's next. You thought waking up was rough, didn't you? Well, breakfast, if we dare call it that, is waiting for you. And it makes yesterday's stale bread seem like gourmet dining. You stumble forward, your boots sinking into half-frozen mud, and the smell from the cooking pot hits your nose like a rotten punchline to some cruel cosmic joke. The thralls handing out today's culinary tragedy barely meet your gaze. They've long since abandoned hope, ladling out portions with an air of resigned indifference. One of them slaps a bowl into your frostbitten hands, the wooden surface rough and splintered. Probably older than your great-grandfather's grandfather. Inside is a greyish paste studded with suspicious lumps. Could be oats, could be gravel, could be something that crawled in and didn't crawl back out. You stare into the bowl, and your stomach turns somersaults. But hunger wins out over your revulsion, and you scoop a mouthful, choking it down with effort. The taste is equal parts bitter sour and regretful, coating your tongue with a film you suspect might linger longer than the memories of this awful morning. As you chew, grimacing, you spot your fellow warriors lining up nearby, grumbling and shivering, their faces drawn with exhaustion and silent resentment at a morning this miserable. But complaining won't fill bellies or warm bodies, so everyone silently chews, swallowing their disappointment along with the gluey gruel. Hygiene comes next. But if you're picturing hot showers or even a lukewarm basin of water, prepare yourself for disappointment. The closest you get to cleanliness is rubbing your face with a fistful of snow scraped off the ground, dirt and ice crystals scraping your skin. Raw, hardly refreshing, but marginally better than nothing at all. You glance around, noticing others doing the same. Men scrubbing their hands with mud-caked snow, women struggling to untangle frozen braids, everyone equally uncomfortable, equally resigned. And speaking of uncomfortable, nature soon calls. But the facilities here don't exactly meet modern OSHA standards. You trudge reluctantly toward a shallow trench at the edge of camp, the wind cutting mercilessly through your flimsy wool cloak, and try not to make eye contact with anyone else as you attend to business. You'd prefer remained private. Modesty isn't exactly high on the Vikings' priority list, and you realize quickly there's nowhere to hide, nowhere to avoid the awkward, silent camaraderie born of communal suffering. As you finish up and shiver violently, longing for warmth that never arrives, you're jolted back to reality by a sudden sharp sound. The clang of axes and weapons being readied nearby warriors gathering for yet another day's brutal tasks. Your bones ache, just thinking about it. Your muscles already weary before you've lifted a single tool. But you know, there's no room here for complaints, only endurance. You pull your cloak tighter, breathing a long, resigned sigh, watching the snowflakes drift mockingly down from a sky that seems to delight in your misery. And as you drag your feet toward the gathering group of surly Vikings, wondering how you'll make it through the next hour, let alone the whole day, a thought strikes you hard and bitter. You haven't even reached the worst part yet. Your fingers are already numb and the day hasn't even started. You rub them together, but it's like grinding two frozen sausages against each other. No feeling, no hope. Around you, the other warriors grunt and stretch joints, popping like dry branches, preparing for another round of whatever hell the day has in store. The sky has shifted from black to a dull, dirty grey, and the wind slices through the camp like it's searching for weakness. It finds plenty. Your cloak is threadbare, your tunic's damp, and your boots have started to split at the soles, letting the cold in like a creeping curse. But there's no time to whine about it. A horn blows a deep groaning noise that sounds more like a wounded animal than a call to action. And that means you move or you get noticed. And getting noticed in this place never ends well. You tighten the ragged leather belt around your waist, adjust the rust-stained axe hanging at your side, and fall into the ragged line forming near the center of camp. The ground crunches beneath your feet, not with snow, but with the frozen remains of yesterday's mud spit, bones, and blood. You try not to think about it. The leader, your Jarl, a man with a beard thick enough to house wildlife and eyes like chipped flint, paces in front of the line, barking orders in a voice that sounds like it's been soaked in mead and scraped across stone. His cloak is thick, made from wolf pelts, real fur from real kills, and you hate how warm it looks. He points at a group to the west. They're on trench duty, digging new fortifications into the frost-hardened earth. Another group is tasked with sharpening weapons, a deceptively simple job that involves handling cold steel with fingers barely capable of movement. You get firewood detail, which sounds pleasant, until you realize the trees are half a mile away, and every step through the snow feels like dragging your body through syrup. You head out with 4 others, none of whom speak. Conversation is rare out here. Words are wasted breath, and breath is heat. You can't afford to lose. Your body aches with every movement, the cold gnawing into your joints like tiny angry teeth. By the time you reach the tree line, you're sweating inside your clothes but still freezing outside a paradox you've come to hate. You take your axe in both hands, splintered handle, dull blade, your only tool, and start swinging at a brittle, skinny pine. The blade thunks dully against the bark, sending vibrations up your arms, and after the third swing, your shoulders are already burning. It takes longer than it should. Your breath comes in clouds. Your knuckles crack and bleed, and the tree refuses to fall until you've poured half your strength into it. When it finally topples, the crash is muffled by snow. But it might as well be a trumpet announcing your temporary victory over the elements. You and the others drag what you can carry back to camp, where the fire pits barely smolder, their embers coughing up smoke like sick old men. You feed the wood in slowly, watching the flames sputter to life, and for a moment, just a moment, you get close enough to feel the illusion of warmth, but it doesn't last. It never does. As the Jarl passes by again, checking the fire, checking the labor, checking you, your spine stiffens automatically. He doesn't say anything, just looks, but his gaze is a blade all its own. You look away first. You always do. And as he walks off to terrorize someone else, your legs shake, not from cold, but from exhaustion. And something worse, fear. You slump down on a log, elbows on knees, trying to catch your breath, trying to pretend this is survivable. You flex your fingers again, still numb. The fire crackles beside you, and behind you, someone vomits into the snow. You don't turn around. You just sit there staring into the weak flames, like they might reveal something useful, something comforting, something human. But they don't. They just flicker and hiss, and remind you how far you are from anything that resembles warmth. You made it through the morning, barely. But now comes the part where things actually get hard. You're starting to think your joints have betrayed you, turned brittle from cold and treachery, because standing back up takes every ounce of willpower you didn't know you had. And when you finally do rise, your knees crack like firewood, and you swear something in your lower back mutters a threat. But there's no time to baby your aching body. Morning labor is just the appetizer. And now it's time for the full banquet of misery. You shuffle toward the supply tent, if you can even call it that, more a sagging tarp over some poles than anything you trust with your survival. But it's where you're issued your daily gear. The quartermaster barely acknowledges your presence, just grunts and tosses a bundle at you if you catch it. Great. If not, it hits the slush. Yours lands half in the mud, of course. You pick it up and unwrap it to find your uniform for the day. Another tunic, slightly less damp than the one you're already wearing. A wool wrap that smells like moldy goats, and a pair of fur-lined boots that, judging by the crusted blood near the toe, belong to someone who didn't finish their shift yesterday. You strip down in the open like everyone else. There's no such thing as privacy here, just varying levels of shared humiliation, and you brace yourself for the cold against your bare skin, which hits like a slap from a glacier. You dress quickly, trying not to scream, but the wool scratches like you're wrapping yourself in regret. The boots are too tight, and the inside's still wet. Your toes go numb almost instantly, which is somehow both a relief and a warning. You sling your belt back on, adjust your cloak, and head to the gathering point, where today's orders are already being shouted by a man whose voice has more volume than vocabulary. You don't know his name, nobody does. But his bark makes dogs flinch, and his club makes sure you move. Today's task: perimeter patrol. It sounds simple, maybe even a break, until you realize it means a 6-mile trudge through snow-covered hills, with nothing but a splintery spear, and the hope that Saxon raiders or wolves aren't feeling brave today. You fall into formation, shoulders brushing the cloaks of 2 men who haven't bathed since the last time the sun came out, which feels like years ago. The path out of camp is little more than a frozen rut in the earth, iced over and slick like a promise you're about to break. You walk in silence, the only sounds being the crunch of boots, the occasional cough, and the distant caw of a crow that sounds suspiciously like it's laughing at you. Your fingers ache around the spear shaft, and you flex them often, just to make sure they still work, though. You're not sure what good they'll do if something jumps out of the trees. You're not built for this and you know it. You were supposed to be a carver back home, maybe a fisherman if the sea ever warmed up. But now here you are, play acting as a warrior in a place that eats the unprepared and picks its teeth with their bones. You scan the horizon, not because you're vigilant, but because looking forward feels better than looking inward. The hills roll gently, blanketed in white, deceptively peaceful. You start to relax just a bit, just enough to let your mind wander toward the idea of making it back without incident. When the guy next to you suddenly goes down hard, leg twisting beneath him with a sickening pop. No scream, just a grunt and a curse. And now he's on the ground clutching his knee, trying not to cry in front of the rest of you. The patrol leader doesn't even blink. He just shouts for you to keep moving. Tosses a glance back like maybe someone will come get him later, and then turns away. You hesitate just for a second, but then you're shoved forward and reminded that hesitation is weakness. And weakness is how you end up face down in the snow, with no name and no story. You keep walking, swallowing the lump in your throat and ignoring the moan fading behind you. And by the time the camp comes back into view, your boots are soaked, your legs are lead, and your hands are starting to turn a shade of red. That probably means something bad. But hey, at least you didn't fall. At least you're still upright. And in a Viking raid camp, that's pretty much the definition of winning. You don't really remember how your feet carried you back. Only that at some point the horizon blurred and the camp reappeared like a hallucination. You weren't sure you wanted to be real, and now you're limping back through the gates. If you can even call a stack of half-frozen logs lashed together with frayed rope. A gate feeling like your knees are made of damp wood, and your spine's trying to file a formal complaint. No one greets you. No one ever does. The fire pits are down to their last flickers, and the smell of boiled leather, yes, actual leather, tells you it's midday, which means it's time for the next round of culinary despair. You sit, or more accurately collapse, on the nearest chunk of frozen stump, and someone thrusts a bowl into your hands before you even have the energy to ask. You're too tired to protest, too hungry to think, so you just eat, trying not to breathe through your nose because whatever's in the stew has the distinct aroma of something that gave up on life weeks ago. You chew around the gristle swallow hard past the tang of iron and tell yourself it's protein, while your stomach sends up a desperate prayer to any gods who might be listening, and if they are, they're clearly laughing. Across from you, a man with a milky eye and half a nose is gnawing on a bone, like it owes him money, and someone else is already passed out against a barrel, snoring with a gurgle that might mean he's sick or dying, or just incredibly relaxed by Viking standards. You scrape the last of the stew from the sides of your bowl and sit back only for a swarm of biting wind to slap you across the face and remind you you're not done suffering yet. Your clothes are stiff with dried sweat. Your fingers are purple where your gloves don't quite reach, and your boots are leaking again. A drop of something. Hopefully just melted snow. Probably not slides down your back, soaking into your tunic with all the grace of a death sentence. And then comes the itching. It starts subtle. Just a little twitch at the base of your neck. Like maybe a stray hair's tickling you. But then it spreads down your arms, across your back, behind your knees, until you're wriggling like a dog on a flea binge. You scratch and scratch, and the feeling just gets worse, like something is crawling under your skin and laughing about it. Spoiler, something probably is. Lice are less a pest and more a lifestyle out here. Everyone's got them. You heard a guy joking. Maybe joking that the Jarl names his lice and talks to them like pets. You don't even want to know how true that is. You pull off your cloak, slap it against a rock, watch. A few of the little bastards tumble out like they're late to a party. You don't even scream. You just sigh, because this is your life now. A never-ending loop of cold filth and mild parasitic infestation. You wash, if you can call it that, by breaking a crust of ice off the nearest water barrel and rubbing the slush into your skin until you're raw and gasping. It helps briefly, but as soon as you put your cloak back on, you know they'll be back. They always come back. You think about fire, You think about throwing all your clothes in it and watching the lice scream in tiny burning agony. But then you remember you'd be naked, and this weather eats naked people alive. So you scratch, and you suffer, and you keep moving, because standing still too long is how you catch frostbite, or worse, someone's attention. And nothing in this camp is more dangerous than being noticed. The afternoon bleeds into a hazy blur of shivering and scraping and silence. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, not meditative, but watchful. Like the whole camp is waiting for something awful to happen, and just trying to stay small enough that when it does, it lands on someone else. And maybe it's working, because for now, no one's shouting at you. No one's swinging a fist or a hammer or an axe in your direction. And that counts as a good hour in this place. You're ordered to help restack the wood pile, which sounds harmless enough, until you realize the logs are frozen together, like they've decided to die embracing, and your gloves are already so stiff you might as well be wearing 2 damp planks of wood on your hands. You squat, pull, grunt and curse under your breath, fingers cracking like brittle ice chips, arms burning from the morning's patrol, and all the while your breath fogs up and disappears like hope, vanishing into the cold before it even finishes leaving your lungs. There's a kid next to you too young to be here. Maybe 12, maybe less. And he's dragging a splintered stump half his size with a look in his eyes that says he's already seen more horror than most adults back home will ever dream about. He doesn't speak. You don't ask. You both just work until your muscles scream and your backs threaten mutiny, and the pile is neat enough for the quartermaster to grunt and move on. You don't get praise here. You barely get acknowledgement. You just survive the task, and if you're lucky, you're not immediately given another. But luck's not really the currency around here. Suffering is, and yours has interest. You retreat for a moment, huddling near a fire pit that's mostly ash rubbing your hands together, and pretending the heat is more than symbolic. Pretending the smoke isn't stinging your eyes because they're already watering from exhaustion. Someone tosses a strip of dried fish your way jerky, or the Viking equivalent, which is to say it tastes like boot leather soaked in seawater and desperation, and you chew it slowly, trying to ignore the crunch that probably isn't salt. Your teeth ache from the cold, every bite sending a jolt through your jaw like a punishment for being hungry. And you are hungry still, always like your stomach never really fills, no matter how much you stuff into it. You look around and realize everyone else is chewing too silently. Mechanically, like they've all accepted that this is what life is now. A series of bland grey rituals carried out in the cold, waiting for someone to scream or something to explode. You shift your weight and feel something pop in your ankle. Not pain exactly, just a reminder that you're still walking around in a body that's slowly turning to rust. You stretch it out, wince a little, and pull your cloak tighter, because the wind is picking up again, and the sky's gone from grey to that ominous yellowish bruise colour that usually means a storm or worse. You hope it's just a storm. You really hope it's not a fight. You head back to your tent or the sagging collection of stitched hides pretending to be one, and duck inside grateful for the break in wind, even if the inside smells like mildew and smoke, and a dozen damp bodies taking turns snoring, coughing and muttering nightmares into the stale air. You sink into your bedroll wet fur over straw, still itchy, still lice-ridden, and let your head fall back against the bundled cloak you use as a pillow. You close your eyes for just a second, not to sleep. You're not that lucky, but to shut out the world for the briefest blink of time. Someone coughs beside you, deep and wet and close to something worse, and you shift away instinctively. Infection spreads fast here. Sickness is more efficient than the sword. You breathe shallow, try not to inhale whatever's floating in the air, and think about what it might feel like to be warm for 5 minutes, to sit somewhere dry and clean, and not have to worry about the guy next to you dying before morning. But that's not where you are. You're here, in a Viking camp in winter, and the day isn't over, not even close. You wake up the way a corpse might come back to life. Slow, reluctant, and full of regret, and for a second, just one pathetic heartbeat of a moment, you forget where you are. Forget the cold, the smell, the war, the hunger. And then your eyes open and it all floods back, like a slap from the gods. Your breath comes out in clouds, your nose already numb, your hands tucked uselessly inside your tunic, and your mouth tastes like you've been chewing on wool all night, which honestly, you probably have. Someone's boot is pressed into your ribs, either on purpose or by accident. Doesn't matter. And you shove it off weakly, rising to a sitting position that makes your spine crack like it's trying to escape. Your tunic clings to you damp and stiff, and reeking of old sweat and damp fur. And the moment you pull yourself up fully, your feet remind you that they hate you. The boots you stuffed straw into last night for insulation. Yeah, that straw's frozen solid, and now your toes are stuck in some icy foot trap designed by Norse demons. You wrestle with the laces, cursing every ancestor that brought you to this point in history, and finally jam your feet in just far enough to stand. The ground outside the tent is worse than yesterday, slush on top of frozen muck, and every step is like walking across a battlefield made of broken teeth. You stagger toward the latrine trench stomach, bubbling ominously, praying to Odin or Thor or even Loki that you make it in time. You do barely, but it's not graceful. Nothing about mornings here is. You squat and shiver and try to pretend the guy next to you isn't making eye contact while doing the same thing. And the whole time the wind cuts across your exposed parts like a knife dipped in ice water. You don't look back as you leave. You never look back. Then it's over to the water barrel, more ice than water now. And you break through the crust with a stick and splash a handful of icy sludge on your face. It doesn't help. It never helps. Your beard is starting to freeze again, little white crystals forming in the tangled strands and the lice. Still there, still partying. One of them crawls across your wrist like it owns the place. You slap it miss and end up just smacking yourself because that's the kind of day it's shaping up to be. The quartermaster hands you a fresh tunic, if you can call it that. More holes than fabric, smells like it was stored in a grave. You peel off your current one under the open sky, your skin erupting in goosebumps the moment it hits air, and you shove your arms into the new garment. Teeth chattering so hard you're sure one will chip. The wool scratches like sandpaper, but at least it's dry. And for 10 blessed seconds you feel like a human being again. Then the itching starts. Again. You slap your sides and your neck trying to pretend it's not happening, trying to convince yourself this is just how life works now. Because if you stop and think about it too long, the absurdity might break you. You're not dressed so much as layered in suffering tunics. Wrapped bits of hide stitched together by hands that didn't care if you lived or died. You tighten your belt, adjust your cloak, and limp over to the weapon rack, where today's tools of survival or death are laid out in a frozen heap. Your hands shake as you reach for a hatchet, not from fear or even cold at this point, but from exhaustion deep in your bones, like your body is sending up flares that it's not going to make it to sundown. Too bad. You don't get sick days here. You don't get rest. You just keep moving because stopping is something you only do when you've stopped breathing. You hoist the weapon onto your shoulder step, into the formation with the other warriors, and the Jarl's voice slices through the morning like an axe through kindling, barking the day's orders, none of which involve anything remotely comfortable or sane. You brace yourself. Try to block out the dull ache, radiating from every limb, and whisper a little lie to yourself. Just get through the next hour, the next task, the next breath. Then maybe you'll find some warmth. Maybe you'll find some peace. But you won't. Not here. Not today. Because here, in the winter of 871 CE, inside a Viking raid camp that smells like old blood and bad dreams comfort, is a story someone else told in a better life. You barely remember what warmth feels like, only that it's something your bones used to know, something your skin used to trust. But here, in this frozen dirt circus called a Viking raid camp, warmth is just another lie people tell themselves to get through the day. And as you drag yourself through the half-melted sludge toward the day's first task, your joints cracking like angry branches, you realize your body is falling apart in increments slowly, almost politely, like it's trying not to cause a scene while it breaks down piece by miserable piece. Your breath comes out in steady white bursts that look like smoke from a dying fire, and your hands already red and raw grip the haft of your axe, like it's the only solid thing in a world turning to slush, which it basically is. The weapon is chipped at the edge, and the leather wrapping is loose, but it's yours for the moment. And out here, possession is 9/10 of survival. You're assigned to help split wood for the rest of the morning, which might sound manageable, until you realize the logs are more like frozen tree corpses, thick and uncooperative and dense with ice. And every swing of your axe feels like a negotiation with gravity. You try not to wince when the first vibration shoots up your forearms, but the second swing sends a sharp throb through your elbow, and by the third you're pretty sure something's torn a little bit in your shoulder. Not enough to stop, just enough to remind you it's there. The guy next to you is twice your size, and already on his fourth log, sweat pouring from his scalp. Despite the cold, his breath rasping through yellow teeth like he's exhaling curses. You don't know his name. You don't want to. Names make it harder when they don't come back from a raid. You just focus on the rhythm, raise, swing, crack, curse, repeat, and try not to think about how your wrists are beginning to feel like chewed rope. At some point, a thrall limps by with a bucket of water, more slush than liquid, but you grab it and gulp it down anyway, ignoring the bits of bark and grit floating inside, because beggars can't be drinkers with standards. The water stings your teeth, sends a chill through your already frost-kissed spine, but it gives you 10 more minutes of swing time before your legs start to tremble. You pause, flex your fingers and scratch absently at the growing rash on your neck, where your collar's been rubbing all morning, a raw patch that probably has a name by now and maybe even a family tree. You lean on your axe and stare out at the snow-covered perimeter past the collapsed tent that no one's had time to fix, toward the jagged tree line that hides gods know what. You know what's out there though, wolves. Saxon's cold wind that stings like a curse, and the deep, unsettling quiet that only shows up when something bad's about to happen. You've learned to listen for that quiet. You've learned it's never your friend. A sharp whistle cuts through the camp, signaling midday meal. And just like that, axes drop and boots shuffle toward the slop pot, which smells like boiled despair and salt. You follow arms' heavy fingers twitching from overuse. And as you reach the food line, someone behind you sneezes into your hood, and you don't even react because at this point, illness feels inevitable, like gravity or disappointment. You get your bowl same as always. Some flavorless mash that's part root vegetable, part guesswork, and you shovel it into your mouth because chewing slower doesn't make it taste any better. You sit on a log, head down, elbows on knees, and stare into your bowl, like it might offer you something better if you look long enough. But it never does. A shadow falls across you, and you glance up to see the Jarl, tall as sin eyes, sharp and cold, scanning the crowd like a butcher choosing the next cut of meat. He looks right at you for half a second, just long enough to make your stomach drop, then moves on. You exhale and realize you've been holding your breath, then force the rest of your food down before it gets cold. Which is a joke because it was never hot to begin with. You toss the bowl aside, wipe your mouth with your sleeve and stand again, knees cracking like kindling, ready for whatever fresh agony the afternoon plans to throw your way. Because around here rest isn't real, relief isn't coming, and the only reward for surviving the morning is having to do it all over again, with fewer working muscles and even less hope. The wind picks up again, like it's got a personal grudge against you, slicing sideways through the camp with icy claws that crawl up your sleeves and down your neck, and somehow manage to find the one tiny gap in your boot where your sock has worn thin. And you try not to scream because screaming doesn't make you warmer. It just makes you the target of whatever nearby Viking thinks you're soft enough to mess with. And that's not the kind of attention you're looking for today or any day. You push back from the log muscles, aching with a quiet fury that whispers you're not built for this and never were, and you grab your axe again because it's the only thing around here that makes you feel even remotely useful, even if it does hurt like hell to hold it. And you march back toward the woodpile. because the quartermaster is still barking like a dying dog, and there's more to chop, there's always more to chop, like the forest is infinite, and the misery even more so. You work until your vision starts to swim, and your shoulders pulse with a dull rhythmic ache, and when you finally stop, it's not because you're finished, it's because you physically can't lift your arms anymore, and one of your fingers has gone completely numb. Not the tingly kind of numb, but the dead kind. The kind that makes you worry. It might fall off if you look at it wrong. You walk toward the fire pits, what's left of them anyway. Little sputtering pockets of heat surrounded by bodies wrapped in rags and smoke, and you stand close enough that your boots start to steam, but not close enough to burn, because you've already seen what happens to the guy who melts the soles of his only shoes. And it ends with infection and screaming, and a limp that never goes away. You shake out your arms, flex your hands, and cough into your elbow, because the smoke's thick and bitter, and your throat's been raw since sunrise. And someone beside you offers a flask of something that smells like fermented piss and burns like justice. But you drink anyway because it numbs things, and right now numb sounds pretty good. You sit for a second, just long enough to think about home. If you even have one anymore. A flicker of a memory, warm walls, the smell of bread, someone laughing in the next room, and then it's gone, swept away by a gust of wind that reminds you, this is where you are now. And the only thing coming next is more work and more cold. And maybe if the gods are feeling generous a night without nightmares, a shout cuts through the camp. Not the usual kind, but sharp and urgent, and followed by the unmistakable clatter of armor and metal, and people moving fast, and your heart drops, because you know what this means. You've heard that tone before, and it never ends in anything good. You get up, shoulder your axe, and follow the others toward the commotion, your legs stiff and your gut twisting, and when you round the corner, you see it. One of the scouts collapsed in the mud, his face pale and his hands covered in blood that doesn't look like it belongs to him, and he's trying to talk, but his mouth isn't cooperating, and someone leans down to listen, and then looks up and shouts a word that sends a cold ripple through every body in earshot. Saxons. Your breath catches, not because you're scared, you're way past scared, but because you know what happens next. You've seen the drills, you've heard the stories, you know. This isn't going to be one of those days you just survive by blending in and keeping your head down. This is going to be one of those days where everything turns to fire and screaming and frost and blood. You grab your shield, the one you patched together from scraps last week, and you feel the weight of it like a question you don't know how to answer. And your axe suddenly feels too light, too dull, too stupid to matter. You fall into formation because that's what you do. And you listen to the Jarl shout directions and threats, and something about honor, and you nod like you believe him, like you care, like any of that matters when someone's trying to put a sword through your stomach. The others look just as pale, just as tired, just as unsure, but they all square their shoulders and lift their weapons like it might make a difference. Like you're not just a line of half-starved, half-frozen meat waiting to be tested by men who want you dead, for reasons older than you'll ever live to understand. And as the camp shifts, as boots stomp and weapons rise, and the noise builds to a kind of low pulsing panic, you feel something tighten inside you. Not courage exactly, more like inevitability, like a string pulled taut that can't do anything but snap. And you realize with a strange kind of clarity that this isn't about fighting or surviving or even winning. It's about showing up, standing your ground, and hoping the cold gets to them first. Because in this camp, on this frozen earth, death doesn't need to swing a blade. It just needs time. You don't remember deciding to move, but somehow your legs are carrying you, crunching across the frozen mud in sync with dozens of other footsteps, all of them stiff, reluctant, terrified in the kind of way no one admits out loud. Because in a Viking raid camp, fear isn't something you show. It's something you swallow, let rot in your gut, and pretend tastes like courage. The Jarl's voice is still ringing in your ears, barking commands that all blend together in your head. Something about shield walls, perimeter, hold fast, and you nod, even though the words barely land. Because what else can you do? Ask him to repeat himself. Not unless you want to be the warm-up kill before the real fight starts. You're herded with the others toward the edge of camp, toward the tree line where the mist hangs low and thick, like a warning whispered straight from the underworld. And every step feels heavier than the last. Not just because of the gear weighing you down, but because your brain is trying to do that math again. The same impossible equation. It runs every time something like this happens. How fast can I run? How deep can I hide? How far can I fake an injury without actually having to lose a limb? But none of the answers are good. And even if they were, you'd be seen as a coward. Branded, shamed, and probably dead within the hour anyway. So you walk one foot in front of the other. Boot-soaked shield, biting into your arms, breath hitching in your throat as you try to summon the ghost of bravery you left back in some other life. Around you, the others mutter low prayers to gods with names that feel sharp in the mouth. Odin, Thor, Freyja, while a few just stare blankly ahead, like they're already gone, already imagining their bodies on spears, their names sung by the survivors assuming there are any. You grip your axe tighter, try to remember the drills, the stances, the rules, but everything is slipping your fingers, your focus. Even the cold feels distant now, like your body's too distracted by dread to register discomfort. And then in the trees, a shape moves too fast to process but enough to spark panic. And suddenly, the Jarl's not shouting anymore. He's roaring, and the front line forms like muscle memory kicking in, just seconds before chaos shields, raised spears braced, and you stumble into position. At the tail end of the line, squeezed between a man with a broken nose and one who smells like fermented onions and fear, the woods go silent for a beat. The kind of silence that makes your teeth hurt. And then it all explodes, shouting metal on wood, arrows screaming past your ear like angry insects, and the whole world jerks sideways as men charge forward or backward, or into each other. And you're suddenly swinging without thinking, just reacting. Axe rising and falling in clumsy arcs, heart pounding like a war drum inside your skull. You barely see the first man you hit, just feel the impact, the jolt up your arm, the sick sound of something soft giving way under steel. And then he's gone, replaced by another and another. And it blurs it all, blurs, shouting, grunting, blood smoke, the cold forgotten. Until your knees buckle and you're on the ground, shield over your head, someone screaming your name, or maybe just screaming, and your fingers scrabble in the mud for the axe you dropped, finally closing around the haft, just in time to roll away from a blade that whistles down where your neck was a second earlier. You crawl, stagger, get back to your feet, find the broken nose guy beside you bleeding from the scalp, but still standing, still swinging, and you square up again, shoulder to shoulder, because no one survives alone out here. Not in this frozen circle of death where life costs whatever blood you haven't spilled yet. The fighting slows eventually, not because anyone won, but because everyone's too tired to keep losing. And the attackers melt back into the woods like ghosts leaving behind bodies and groans, and the kind of silence that comes when too many people stop breathing at once. You don't cheer, no one cheers. You just stand there gasping, shaking blood on your hands, and none of it yours this time. And you stare at the sky like maybe the gods are up there taking notes. Maybe they'll let you sleep through tonight, without waking to the sound of your own voice, begging for something to stop. You head back to the fire, the pit you left like a lifetime ago, and the heat feels like a lie now, like something that belongs to someone else, and you sit without a word, axe in your lap, hands trembling, and you realize something broke in you out there, something small but essential, and no one saw it, no one knows but you do. And tomorrow you'll get up and do it again, because that's what this place demands, that you break and smile anyway. You don't really remember walking back, your legs moving on their own, like they're not yours anymore, like your body's been loaned to something ancient and automatic and grim, and all you know is the camp reappears through the mist, like it's risen from the earth, familiar and strange all at once. Smoke curling from dying fires, the smell of blood clinging to the wind, like a rumor that won't let go. And as you pass through the broken gate, you feel the full weight of what just happened settle into your muscles, a slow collapse from the inside out. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet unraveling. You sit because standing feels like an insult to gravity, and your fingers unclench only when you realize you're still holding your axe. The dried blood flaking off in little brown curls, and you wipe it clean without thinking. Not out of pride, but out of habit. The same way you'd brush crumbs from your lap or rinse a dish like murder is just another task you check off before supper. Your breath is shallow and sharp, and you're suddenly aware of how hard your heart is pounding, like it's been waiting for permission to freak out. And now that the danger's past, it's staging a one-organ rebellion inside your chest. Around you, other survivors are stumbling back into the firelight, some limping, some bleeding, none of them speaking unless absolutely necessary. Because what do you even say after something like that? Nice swing back there. Sorry about your shoulder, better. Luck next time. A man sits across from you, his arm wrapped in a strip of cloth that used to be a tunic. His eyes hollow, not crying, just lost in that post-battle limbo, where nothing feels real and everything smells like iron. Someone brings a pot of stew or something, pretending to be stew, and you're handed a bowl that you stare into, like it's going to give you answers. But all it offers is a lukewarm sludge of roots and whatever protein the thralls managed to salvage before the fight. You eat it anyway, because hunger is louder than trauma, and survival is a task you can't skip. The food is gritty and bland, but it grounds you, and with each bite you feel a little more connected to the earth beneath your boots, to the cold, to the horrible reality that this is your life now. The Jarl walks past trailing smoke and silence, his fur cloak streaked with someone else's blood. And everyone looks down when he passes, not out of respect, but out of muscle memory. Because eye contact with a man like that is a coin toss you don't want to flip. He stops, barks a few orders in a voice like gravel and thunder. Something about fortifying the camp, about watch rotations and digging new trenches. And you nod before your brain catches up, because saying no isn't an option. You drop your bowl, pick up a spade, and start digging, because that's what you do when your world's been turned upside down and your hands don't know how to be still. The dirt is frozen and uncooperative, more ice than earth, and every scoop is a struggle against nature itself. But you keep going, shoulders screaming, back aching, because stopping is a luxury for people who aren't worried about being stabbed in their sleep. As you dig, someone hums a tune. Low, sad, familiar. Maybe a lullaby or a funeral song, and it floats above the scraping of metal on ice like a thread of humanity. No one asked for, but everyone needs. You don't join in, but you let the sound anchor you, remind you that you're still here, still breathing, even if you're not sure why. By the time the trench is done, your hands are blistered and your mind is numb, and you drop the spade and sit back on your heels, staring at the shallow ditch like it's a grave you haven't decided to lie down in yet. The sky is bruised and heavy clouds swollen with more snow, and the sun is nowhere to be seen, just a pale smear behind the haze. You shiver and pull your cloak tighter, even though it's soaked and stinks of smoke and sweat, because that's all you've got. And for a second you wonder what you looked like before this, who you were before the cold, before the lice, before the screaming and the blood and the endless gnawing hunger. But the thought passes like most do, and you stand again, because there's still work to do. There's always work to do, and nobody survives here by standing still and asking questions. You're not sure what hurts more, your back, your hands, or the inside of your skull, where the fear from earlier is still echoing, like the tail end of a thunderclap you can't shake off. And as you put down the spade and stretch just enough to feel something pop near your spine, you wonder how many more days like this your body's got left in it before something gives out completely, and they just use you as extra firewood. But there's no time to worry about that, because someone's already barking at you to help reinforce the palisade near the southern edge of camp, the one that got nearly torn through during the chaos. And so you haul yourself over with feet that feel like bags of wet grain, and eyes that sting with smoke and fatigue, and whatever despair weighs these skies down like a storm that never quite breaks. You're handed a hammer, the handle wrapped in dirty cloth and slick with someone else's sweat, and you get to work driving wooden stakes deeper into the frozen earth, each swing jarring your arms up to the shoulders, and every time you miss the post and hit your thumb, which is often you don't even curse anymore. You just grunt and keep swinging because pain is background noise now. Just another drumbeat in the long march of misery that defines your every hour in this place. Next to you, two men are arguing something about how much space to leave between the stakes, or maybe whose job it is to dig the next hole. But their voices are hushed tense, like everyone's too tired to fight, but too angry not to. And it ends with one of them muttering and walking off, and the other hammering harder, faster, like maybe if he hits the wood hard enough, he can crack open the world and crawl into some place warmer. You pause to catch your breath, rest your forehead against the rough wood, and stare past the perimeter into the endless white beyond the trees, the snow falling again, not heavy but constant, tiny flakes that settle on your eyelashes and melt just slow enough to remind you how cold your face is. You think about how long it's been since you felt clean, not just washed, but actually clean. The kind of clean where your skin doesn't itch and your breath doesn't stink and your clothes don't feel like wet burlap sacks full of regret. You think about the bathhouse back home, the hot water, the steam, the feeling of scrubbing away an entire week of sweat and salt. And the memory feels like fiction now, like a story someone told you once about a place you'll never visit. The lights fading, and the shadows stretch long and lean across the camp, and someone starts lighting the torches one by one, the flames flickering weakly in the wind, like they're not quite convinced this place is worth illuminating. You finish the last of your post-step back to admire your not-so-handy work, and hear the call for evening rations, a sound that's equal parts relief and dread because you're starving, sure, but also fully prepared for the food to be yet another punishment disguised as sustenance. You trudge over to the line bowl in hand, your fingers barely able to wrap around it now. And when you're served, the stew is even thinner than yesterday, more water than substance. And it smells like it's been reheated too many times to still qualify as edible. But you swallow it down anyway, burning your tongue in the process because letting it cool means someone else might steal it. And you've learned that nothing here is ever safe if it isn't clutched close and defended. You sit down on a cold rock hunched over your bowl, slurping fast, and a piece of gristle gets stuck in your teeth. And for a second, irrational and sudden, you think about how much you'd give for a toothpick. Or hell, even a mint something to remind your mouth. It belongs to a person, and not just a wild animal pretending to function. When the bowl's empty, you scrape the last traces with your finger, lick it clean, and set it down beside you, cradling your hands in your armpits to warm them as the wind starts howling again. Meaner this time, like it's been saving up some special spite just for the night. Someone screams in the distance, not fear, more anger or pain, or maybe both. And no one gets up. No one even turns their head, because whatever's happening over there is someone else's problem. And right now, staying warm and awake and not dying quietly, where you sit is the only thing anyone has energy for. You close your eyes for a second, just a second, head bowed, a breath shallow. And when they open again, it's darker, colder, and quieter. And the only thing waiting for you now is night. You'd think after a day like that, the camp would soften, maybe settle into something resembling calm. But there's no such thing as calm in a Viking raid camp. Not really. Not when survival itself is a full-time job, and every face you pass is equal parts threat and trauma, wrapped in fur and frostbite. And as night settles like a cold, damp blanket across everything, You find yourself walking slower, watching more carefully, because now the danger shifts, not from outsiders, but from within, from the very people eating beside you, breathing beside you, sleeping beside you. And it's not paranoia if they really are looking for someone to blame, someone to punch, someone to bleed. The fire pits crackle weakly, surrounded by hunched figures in layers of tattered wool and desperation, their eyes hollow, their mouths chewing on whatever passed for dinner without tasting any of it. And you slide into a spot near the edge, not too close, not too far, just close enough to soak in the illusion of warmth and not catch a fist meant for someone else. You've started to recognize the rhythms of the place, the way voices drop after sunset, the way men with power walk slower at night, like they're daring someone to challenge them, the way thralls disappear into shadows and hope the cold kills them slower than a Viking's temper. You stir the mud near your boots with a stick and listen to the quiet conversations that never say anything directly, but always mean something power-shifting, in glances and grunts, alliances forged and broken over stale bread and slurred threats. One man jokes, if you can call it a joke, that someone stole from the weapons cache, and another suggests it was one of the newcomers. And for a second, everyone looks up and scans the faces around the fire like the thief might confess right then and there. Like anyone dumb enough to steal wouldn't already be halfway to dead in a ditch. But then the moment passes and the tension drops just enough that you remember to breathe. This is the part of the day where status matters most, where who you are and who you belong to keeps you from being the one someone picks a fight with just because their fingers are itchy and their pride is bruised. You don't belong to anyone here. Not yet. Not really. Which means you keep your mouth shut and your head down, and you laugh when someone makes a comment. Even if it's not funny. Especially if it's not funny, because laughing is safer than silence. And silence is safer than opinion. A man across the fire spits into the flames and mutters something about weak bloodlines, about how the camp's going soft, and he looks right at you when he says it. Not accusing, not directly, but you feel it land anyway, like a stone tossed into a shallow grave, and you hold his gaze for just long enough to show you're not prey. Not tonight. Then look away, like it never happened. That's the game here. Don't flinch, don't bark, don't break. Just keep breathing and hope you're not next. Somewhere behind you, a scuffle breaks out, sharp voices, and a sudden thud of something hitting something, and everyone tenses like they're deciding whether to intervene or pretend it's thunder. And then it's over, or quiet enough to pass as over, and the firelight keeps dancing like nothing ever happened. You get up slowly, legs stiff back screaming, and walk away from the pit toward the tents. Every step calculated to look relaxed, unbothered, as if you haven't been sizing up the people around you all evening, measuring which one might snap first, which one might decide that fighting you is the fastest way to feel powerful again. Your tent, if that's what we're calling this leaning mess of skins and twine, sits at the edge of camp, half sheltered by a rock, and you duck inside like you've done it 1,000 times, even though every night feels like a gamble. Every return to this pile of straw and cold cloth, a roll of dice you didn't ask to play. You lay down without taking off your boots, because pulling them off means committing to rest, and you're not sure that's a smart bet. Not when half the camp smells like tension, and the other half smells like something died and no one wants to deal with it. You wrap your cloak around your shoulders, breathe through your mouth to block the scent of mildew and wet fur, and stare at the tent wall, where your shadow flickers in the torchlight, small and shaking, and not nearly as tough as you pretend to be. Out there, someone laughs too loud, too fast, the sound brittle and sharp, and you pull the cloak tighter, willing your heartbeat to slow down to match the stillness around you, even though you know it's not stillness, it's waiting, always waiting, for a knife in the dark, for a scream, for the sound of someone else becoming tonight's example. Sleep doesn't come, not really, not the kind that rests you, not the kind you wake from feeling better, and you don't even remember closing your eyes. But at some point, The torchlight outside fades, and your breath grows louder than the wind, and your limbs stop twitching and aching long enough for your mind to go soft at the edges. But you're never fully gone. Not here. Not when one bad dream could be someone else's fist. Not when footsteps outside your tent could mean a shift in the hierarchy, or just someone drunk looking for a face to break. So you lie there in that half-conscious fog, blinking at the dark ceiling, listening to the wet creak of hide in the wind, and the occasional muffled cough from nearby, like a reminder that someone close to you might not make it through the week. You adjust your position just slightly, trying not to make noise the straw beneath you, crunching like old bones and your leg cramps. But you grit your teeth through it because even pain feels safer than letting yourself slip into sleep fully and miss the sound of someone creeping up behind you. You drift anyway because eventually the body takes what it's owed. But it's a shallow, restless thing, a dream of trudging through knee-deep snow that turns to mud, that turns to blood, and your boots stick with each step. And when you try to look up, your head won't move, like it's been frozen in place, and then you wake again gasping, heart racing, the taste of iron in your mouth, even though you haven't bitten anything, and your first thought is that someone's in the tent. But when your eyes adjust, it's just you, just the gear, you stuffed into the corners, just your own shadow cast in strips by the dying light of a distant fire. You sit up slow, letting your spine unfold like a reluctant scroll and rub your eyes with the back of your hand, knuckles scraping across your cheeks, dry and cracked from wind and ash and cold, and there's that sour smell again, your own breath, your clothes, your life. And you think about when you last washed anything and can't remember if it was this week or the one before, or maybe just a wish you had that never got answered. You crawl out of the tent, careful not to wake anyone, if anyone's even still sleeping, and step into the brittle cold of early dawn. Not morning yet, just the pale, watery grey of a world that's thinking about waking up, but hasn't committed to it. The camp is quieter than usual. No shouting yet, no drills. Just the slow clink of someone checking weapons, or the low scrape of a blade being sharpened by a hand that never stopped moving. You walk a little, boots dragging in the frost, and head toward the edge of the camp, where a few makeshift graves have been dug. Shallow mounds of disturbed earth and piled stones, not marked, not honored, just there because bodies rot fast and winter doesn't wait. You stop at one. Not sure why, maybe because it's fresh. Maybe because the shovel's still leaning against a tree beside it, forgotten or left as a warning. And you stare at the mound, like it might speak. Like it might tell you something useful. Like, what's the difference between the ones who get put in the ground and the ones still walking around, pretending to be whole? You turn away before the thoughts get too loud, before they start sticking, and head back toward the center of camp. Hands shoved deep into your cloak, fingers curling tight like they're trying to hold on to heat or hope, or something more than splinters and frostbite. You pass a group of men huddled around a fire that barely burns, muttering to each other in short, clipped tones that say everything without saying anything. And you keep moving, because if you stop, you become part of whatever they're planning. And you've learned the hard way that being part of something here is usually just another way to bleed. You duck into a shadow between tents, lean against the wood frame of a supply shed. Close your eyes again. Not to sleep, just to reset and try to remember your own name spoken gently, the sound of laughter not meant to cut the feeling of someone touching your arm without expecting blood. It's getting harder. Each day makes those memories blurrier, fainter, like you're being erased piece by piece and replaced with something colder, rougher, meaner. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how this place survives, by breaking you down into something useful, something dangerous, something just like them. By the time the sun drags itself over the horizon like a wounded animal, the camp is already breathing smoke and tension. Everyone moving with that twitchy, half-alert stiffness that says, no one really slept, just close their eyes, and hope not to get stabbed or frozen or swallowed by whatever thoughts clawed their way into their heads during the night. And as you step away from the wall, you were leaning against your legs, remind you they're still mad about yesterday, your joints creaking like badly carved hinges as you head toward the center of camp, where the first sounds of the morning chaos are beginning to boil over. Someone's arguing by the armory, something about gear gone missing, or maybe someone taking more than their share, and the shouting's sharp loud but doesn't last because eventually it always ends the same way, with one guy storming off and the other pretending he didn't just get humiliated in front of a dozen people, trying real hard to look like they're not listening. You grab your axe because you know the drill by now. And sure enough, orders come flying before you've even wiped the crust from your eyes. Chop more firewood, reinforce the trenches, patrol the eastern perimeter, and every command is spoken like it's urgent, life or death. Even when it's really just busy work meant to keep people moving, so they don't start thinking too much, because thinking here gets you in trouble, and trouble gets you hurt. And hurting is one step closer to being the guy whose name nobody remembers next week. You're put on patrol, lucky you, and it means trudging through ankle-deep sludge that's trying real hard to rebrand itself as mud, but is still mostly ice and ash, and your breath fogs the air in front of you like smoke from a dying fire. Every step colder than the last, every tree just another silhouette of something that might kill you if you look away for too long. The guy walking beside you has a scar across his face that pulls his lip into a permanent sneer, and he doesn't talk, which you're thankful for, because conversation out here is just an excuse to admit how close to the edge you are. And once that dam breaks, there's no patching it back up. You walk in silence, scanning the forest. Eyes darting from branch to shadow to snowdrift. Heart ticking steady, but fast. And even though you don't see anything, you can feel something out there. The weight of being watched. The kind of silence that presses against your chest like a hand. Eventually, you loop back nothing to report, but your own paranoia. And by the time you're back in camp, the fire pits are lit, and the smells of whatever passes for breakfast are crawling through the air. Burnt barley, old meat, maybe something fermented for flavor or punishment. Hard to tell. But your stomach growls on cue, and you line up like everyone else. Bowl in hand, eyes down. The food is barely warm, congealed at the edges, and you sit on a cold stone to eat it, huddled in your cloak, pretending the heat from the stew is enough to make a difference. Someone next to you cracks a joke about frostbite and marriage, something crude and bitter and almost funny, and you force a laugh, not because it's funny, but because not laughing would make you the one who doesn't get it. And being outside the joke here is the first step toward being outside the circle entirely. You finish eating, lick the bowl clean like it matters, and hand it back. Fingers red and stiff, and before you can even think about resting, someone's barking at you again to help with the water barrels, the ice having sealed them shut overnight like they've decided they're done being useful. And so you spend the next hour hammering at frozen lids, chipping away with a knife that's lost its edge, and your patient's shoulders burning, teeth clenched. Eventually the barrels give, and you fill buckets, slosh them toward the cook tent, hands slipping water, spilling boots, soaked again. And by the end of it, you're so cold you can't tell if you're sweating or dying. You sit down just for a second, just to breathe, and a man walks past you with a limp and a black eye, his shirt torn. A look in his face like the world forgot to end when it was supposed to. And for a moment you wonder if you look like that too. If everyone here is just wearing different variations of the same unraveling, threadbare soul. You close your eyes not to rest, but to disappear for half a breath. And when you open them again, the work is waiting. And so are the voices. And the sky is just a big grey mirror reflecting everything you don't want to admit, how this life, this cold, this never-ending crawl toward nothing, is shaping you into someone you swore you'd never become. And maybe the worst part is, it's starting to fit. You don't even notice the ringing in your ears until everything else goes quiet, like your brain forgot to switch off battle mode, even though no one's fighting anymore. No blades are swinging, no one's shouting commands, just the dull thud of footsteps and the drag of work behind eyes that haven't seen sleep in days. And as you sit there, still damp, still cold, still vibrating, from whatever you were just forced to carry or kill or clean, you hear it, that low tone in your skull. That means your body's been yelling at you for hours, and you just weren't listening. You blink up at the sky like maybe it'll offer something. Besides that wet grey ceiling it always wears, and you try to stretch the knot out of your back. But your shoulder screams in protest, and your fingers don't quite close right anymore. And none of that is even the real problem, because now it's the 6th day since the raid, or the 5th, or maybe the 9th, you've stopped counting. And today is when the camp priest shows up. You hear the voice first low and slow, and sticky like tree sap, reciting something in Old Norse that's supposed to be sacred, but mostly sounds like a threat. And when you finally turn to look, you see him wrapped in furs that still have the heads on them, a necklace of bones rattling against his chest as he walks through the camp like a shadow that decided to grow teeth. He doesn't look at you, not directly, just scans the space like he's checking for rot, like he can smell who's not right with the gods, and you shift your weight and try not to stand out, which is impossible, because anyone trying not to stand out ends up glowing like a fire in a cave, and sure enough, his eyes land on you. You freeze not because you believe in his gods, not really, not anymore, but because everyone else does, and fear is contagious. And if this man decides you're cursed or guilty, or just unlucky, that's the kind of mark you don't scrub off. He mutters something, maybe your name, maybe not, and moves on. But you don't breathe again until he's out of sight, leaving behind a trail of silence and tightened jaws, and one poor soul who actually got pulled aside and now has to kneel by the fire, while the priest smears ash on his forehead and whispers in his ear like he's planting nightmares one syllable at a time. No one helps. No one speaks. It's religion, which means it's law, which means it's dangerous. And you've already got enough enemies without adding invisible ones. Later, when you're sent to the river to fill buckets, because apparently water doesn't haul itself, you walk past a wooden pole carved with runes and crusted red at the base where something was sacrificed last night. Probably a goat, hopefully not a person. And you feel that same old chill, not from the wind, not from the snow, but from the thought that someone actually believes the gods are watching this place and nodding in approval. You want to laugh, but it sticks in your throat, because a part of you, the part that remembers childhood stories and warnings about trolls and cursed blood, still listens when the wind howls a certain way, or when the flames crack just wrong. You get to the river, more ice than water, and break through the surface with a rock. Hands already numb, and as you scoop the water with a bent tin bowl, your reflection stares back at you like it's sizing you up for a coffin. You look worse than you thought. Sunken eyes, cracked lips, a smear of dried blood on your cheek from who knows what, and for a second, just one slippery heartbeat. You wonder if you're still you at all, or if something has started borrowing your shape while you sleep. You shake it off, fill the buckets, stagger back uphill with arms screaming, and dump the water, where they tell you without comment, because if you start complaining now, you'll never stop. The priest is gone when you return like he was never here, just a dream everyone had at the same time, and in his place is a fresh pile of firewood, a few sharpened blades, and the same pitiful stew bubbling in the pot, as if the day reset itself, but left you behind. You sit by the fire, stretch your legs and stare into the smoke, trying not to think about how long it's been since you heard a voice that didn't carry a warning or a prayer, or the edge of something sharp. Around you, the camp begins its slow rotation again, bodies moving like clockwork. Nothing holy about any of it. And you wonder if the gods really are watching, or if they looked once and turned away, disappointed by what they saw, and unwilling to waste another second on people who can't even wash their hands before a meal. You reach down, touch the ash on the ground, smear it between your fingers, and let it fall, telling yourself it's just dirt, nothing more, but it sticks anyway. You don't even make it halfway through your bowl of stew before the wind shifts and the smoke changes color, blacker, thicker, bitter in the back of your throat, like burned hair and sour meat. And you look up to see a new column of it rising just past the tree line, which means something out there is on fire. And everyone knows fires don't start on their own this time of year, unless someone or something really wants them to. And suddenly, the half-dozen people around you are standing, bowls abandoned, heads, turning eyes narrowing like they're trying to squint away the possibility that this is going to be another problem. But deep down, they already know it is. The Jarl storms out of his tent before anyone says a word, fur cloak snapping behind him like it's trying to escape his voice. Already halfway between a bark and a growl, and before you know it, names are being shouted, patrols are being formed, and you're being shoved a spear that's half splintered and still sticky with sap, because now it's your turn again. Like it ever stopped being your turn. You fall in with the rest boots crunching through half-frozen slush, every step louder than it should be. Every branch overhead groaning like it's trying to warn you to turn around, and no one saying much. Just breathing hard, gripping weapons too tightly, waiting for the first scream or arrow or rustle that doesn't belong. You move fast even though your knees are stiff and your shoulders ache and the inside of your boot has rubbed your heel raw, because fear has a way of bypassing all that pushing you forward like a cold hand between the shoulder blades. When you reach the clearing, the smell hits first charred meat. Not quite human, but not either. And the remains of a cart are still smouldering. Wheels cracked, iron nails twisted from heat, and the horse that pulled it is in pieces, torn or burned or both. And whatever was in the cart is long gone, stolen or scattered. A few sacks of barley burst open, and smoking lie nearby. And someone curses maybe about the wasted food, maybe about the wasted effort of hauling it here in the first place. You fan out circling the perimeter, eyes scanning for tracks for movement, for blood that isn't yours. And it doesn't take long to find it. A trail ragged and obvious, leading away through the underbrush. Like whoever did this wasn't even trying to hide. The Jarl points barks orders and the group splits one half to follow the other half to clean up. And of course, you get put on the latter. Because that's the kind of luck you've got. And so you kneel beside the horse carcass and try not to breathe too deep as you pull the remains apart enough to salvage what's left of the harness and leather strapping, your fingers slipping on slick, warm patches you don't think too hard about. A raven lands nearby, one eye missing, hopping closer, like it knows there's more to come. And you glare at it, but it just stares back unbothered, like it's been here longer than you and plans to outlive you too. When the cleanup is done, and there's nothing left to save but ashes, you stagger back to camp with your hands raw and your stomach twisted, and that same ugly feeling crawling up your spine that you've learned to recognize as prophecy. Back at camp, the mood is heavier, the air tighter, and the priest back standing near the fire, like he's part of it, and you try not to meet his eyes as he mutters under his breath and draws something in the ash with a stick that might once have been a bone. The Jarl steps up to speak, announces that the raiders, or whoever did this, are being hunted down, that the gods are watching, that vengeance will come swift, and everyone nods, because they're supposed to. Because this is the script, the story you all pretend to believe in, but no one really looks convinced. And as the crowd breaks apart, you hear a voice behind you mutter that the gods stopped watching when the snow started falling. You eat your second half of stew, cold now, gummy and congealed, and you sit by the fire, because there's nowhere else to go, and you stare into it too long enough to see shapes that aren't there, and hear sounds you know you imagined, but they still make you flinch. Someone laughs, a little too hard, a few feet away. Someone else throws up behind the cook tent, and you just sit there, hands on your knees, shoulders hunched, wondering what you're supposed to do next. When even the routines are starting to break, when even the fear feels old and worn down, and something meaner is trying to take its place. The fire crackles low, throwing out more smoke than heat, and you stare into it like you're trying to hypnotize yourself into forgetting where you are, who you've become, how your hands shake, not from the cold anymore, but from something quieter, deeper, something that sits behind your ribs and hums all the time now, like a warning you can't outrun, and no one around you looks much better. Everyone hunched and hollowed faces pinched by more than frost eyes, carrying that wide, haunted glaze, like they've seen something in the woods that followed them back and never left. And maybe they have. The priest is still nearby, whispering to a group of warriors too tired to pretend they're not listening, too afraid not to, and you can't hear what he's saying, but you recognize the rhythm, the slow drip of myth dressed up as prophecy, the way he wraps every curse in a prayer and makes obedience sound like salvation. And even though you don't believe in the gods the way they do, you feel something heavy settle on your shoulders, like their belief is contagious, like doubt is the one thing that'll get you killed faster than honesty out here. A woman walks past you, thin, hunched, dragging a sack of wood, and her hands are shaking so bad she nearly drops it. But no one offers help, because help is a luxury, and sympathy gets you marked as weak and weakness. Here is just another word for target. You rise slowly, your knees screaming, your back catching, like it's got rusted hinges, and you follow the perimeter path out of habit now. Just doing something, anything to keep from unraveling in front of people. Because once you come apart in front of the others, you don't get put back together, you get replaced. The forest presses close at the edge of camp, thick and knotted and black, even in daylight, and you watch it like it might reach in and pluck someone out. And honestly, you're not sure you'd blame it if it did. Everything feels wrong lately. The way the animals go quiet before sunset. The way food spoils faster than it should. The way that old man near the pit keeps carving the same symbol over and over into the dirt like he's trying to remember something the rest of you forgot. You shake it off and keep walking. But there's that feeling again that someone's watching you. Not the Jarl, not the priest. Something older, colder, something that doesn't care if you believe in it or not. You stop, wait, listen. Nothing but wind and the dull echo of steel on stone from someone sharpening a blade back at camp. But your neck stays tight, your breath stays short, and you know better than to ignore that. When you circle back toward the tents, the sun's already bleeding into the hills, a red smear across the sky like the earth's got an open wound, and someone's tending the fire with trembling hands, feeding it too fast like they're afraid it'll go out and take the rest of them with it. Supper is another mystery stew, thick with chunks that don't have names, and a broth that tastes like wood smoke and regret. And you eat it without looking into the bowl too closely, because guessing is worse than chewing. The Jarl doesn't eat with the rest of you. He's pacing, muttering to one of his lieutenants, eyes sharp and restless, and like he's waiting for something to snap. And maybe he is. Maybe we all are. Later, when most of the camp has gone quiet again, you sit near one of the dying fires and try to rub warmth back into your fingers. And someone asks you if you believe in omens. You shrug because saying yes makes you sound like a coward, and saying no makes you sound like a fool, and the truth is, you're just tired of everything that doesn't make sense, and everything that makes too much. He tells you about a dream, crows circling over the tents, blood in the snow, a voice whispering from the trees, and you nod like you haven't had the same one. You lie back after that cloak pulled up to your chin, watching the sky stars hiding behind clouds, like even they don't want to witness what's coming. And you listen to the slow, steady rhythm of the camp settling into the shape of another night, knowing full well that shape never holds, knowing that whatever's been circling just beyond the firelight is still there, still watching, still waiting for the next weak link to give way. And maybe, just maybe, it's going to be you. The storm doesn't arrive with fanfare or warning. No thunderclap or howling gust to announce it, like in the stories your grandfather used to mutter. When the fire got low, the ones about gods arguing overhead and shaking the sky to remind mortals where they stood. No, this one seeps in quiet like a bad thought, like regret. And when you wake, it's not the cold that gets you first. It's the absence of sound, the world so muffled you think you've gone deaf. Until you pull your head from under the cloak and see it, the snow coming down in a slow, deliberate curtain, not falling, but hanging thick and heavy and endless, turning everything white and shapeless. The edges of the camp swallowed in a way that makes it feel like the world stopped existing beyond the fire pits. You push yourself upright, arms stiff back, locked in a shape that doesn't want to unfold, and every breath you draw cuts sharp in your chest, dry and freezing like inhaling powdered glass. And when you stand, your legs don't cooperate at first, too numb to trust, too angry at how little rest you gave them. And you have to brace yourself against the tent pole before you take a step, and then another boot's crunching through fresh snow that's already knee-deep in places hiding the mud and rocks, and whatever else might want to twist your ankle into a reason to stop. No one says much this morning. Mouths hidden behind scarves and frozen beards, eyes narrowed against the flakes that stick and melt and freeze again. On lashes and brows and cheeks, and the usual rhythm of camp, the coughs, the grunts, the muttered complaints, and clatter of tools has quieted everyone moving slower, conserving breath, huddling tighter near what little warmth they can find. Because this is the kind of cold that doesn't just make you miserable, it makes you stupid. Makes you drop things, forget things, fall asleep, standing up. And if you let it get ahead of you, if you let it take root in your bones, it will bury you in your own clothes before anyone even notices. You've stopped moving. They send you with 3 others to clear the southern path. Not because it matters all that much, but because something always needs doing. And you wade through thigh-high snow with a shovel too dull and a cloak too thin. Your hands so numb you can't feel the handle after the first 10 minutes. And the guy beside you keeps shaking his fingers and muttering under his breath like he's trying to cast a spell or break a curse, or maybe just talk himself out of lying down in the snow and calling it a day. You work in silence, digging, packing, stomping, clearing a trench through the drift, and it takes hours to move 10 feet because every scoop you toss aside is half replaced by the time you turn around. And the snow doesn't stop, doesn't slow, just keeps falling soft and cruel. And your eyebrows freeze together and your lips crack, and you start to lose track of where you are in your own body, like you're watching yourself from a few feet away, detached, floating, numb in more ways than one. One of the men collapses and doesn't get up right away, and everyone freezes. Not because we care exactly, but because this is the moment, the test, the line between we're fine, and this is bad, and after a few seconds he groans and rolls over, curses, and we all go back to digging, like we didn't just witness our own futures slumped in the snow. By the time you make it back to camp, the sun's long gone, though you never saw it rise, and everything's dim and blue and still, and wrong in a way you can't explain, like the world forgot to finish loading, and the tents look like hunched backs in the dark, and the fires are down to coals, and the wind cuts sideways through the camp like it's lost and angry about it. You collapse by the nearest heat source, hands trembling as you try to undo the frozen ties on your cloak, and someone offers you a scrap of smoked fish that's so dry it feels like eating bark, but you chew it anyway. Grateful just to have something to chew, because eating reminds you that your jaw still works, that you're still alive in some mechanical way. The priest is out again, bareheaded, and chanting snow collecting on his shoulders, like he doesn't even feel it, drawing symbols in the frost with a bone, and muttering about the end of cycles, and the cold being more than just weather. And no one laughs this time. No one calls him mad, because something about today feels worse, heavier, like the cold's listening now, like it's waiting for you to admit you're afraid. You bury your hands under your arms, curl into yourself, and watch the flames rise and fall like a dying heartbeat, thinking about how easy it would be to drift off to let the cold in, just a little further, to stop fighting it for 5 minutes and pretend it's peace instead of punishment. But then someone stumbles into the fire ring face white and fingers purple, and we all snap back into ourselves just enough to drag him close. Rub his arms, slap his cheeks, curse at him until his eyes focus, and that's enough to remind you you can't stop. Not even for a minute. Not in this storm, not in this camp. Not while there's breath left in your chest and enemies you haven't seen yet still waiting beyond the trees. The storm doesn't let up, not even a little. Just keeps falling like the sky decided it was done, pretending to care about you. And now it's dumping everything. It's got in one long, slow punishment that doesn't end. And the snow piles so high against the sides of tents, you start to forget what the ground used to look like, what dirt feels like under your boots, what air tastes like when it isn't filtered through freezing mist, and the sharp sting of smoke and old meat and breath gone stale from too many mouths too close together. And nobody says it, but everybody's thinking it, that this storm isn't normal, that it's too thick, too heavy, too long, like it's being sent, like the gods have noticed this camp and decided they don't like what they see. You're sent to dig again, not even to clear a path this time, but to keep the roofs from collapsing. Which is somehow worse, because now you're climbing on top of the same tents you sleep under, hacking at the snow with a flat board, while praying your foot doesn't punch through the hide and land in someone's face or fire pit, or worse. And your hands are so cold you can't feel your grip, and your knees keep locking up, and your mind wanders even though it shouldn't, because you know better. You know the second you start thinking about anything other than not falling and not freezing and not dying, that's when it creeps in that little whisper that maybe it'd be easier if you just slipped. Maybe it'd be quieter if you let the snow win for once. But you don't. Not yet. You clear the roof, slide down legs, aching, and stumble back toward the fire pit that isn't even a fire anymore, but a few shivering coals guarded like treasure by 3 men who look half dead and completely out of jokes, and you crouch beside them, teeth chattering, eyes watering, smoke stinging. And for a minute, none of you speak, because there's nothing to say, nothing that doesn't sound like begging. One of them finally mutters something about the drifts piling so high they're gonna bury the walls by nightfall. And someone else says, good, let the snow cover us. Maybe we'll finally get some sleep. And you laugh a little too hard at that because it's not funny, but it feels like it should be. And once you start, it's hard to stop. You rub your hands together, not because it helps anymore, but because not doing it would mean giving in, and your fingers are a mess of cracks and grime and frostbite creeping in at the edges. But you don't look too close, because if you acknowledge it, it becomes real, and there's no time for that kind of honesty. A shout rings out from the far side of camp, and everyone tenses, not with alarm, but exhaustion. The kind of slow-motion dread that says, whatever it is, it better be worth it. But it never is. And sure enough, it's just one of the new guys, collapsed near the latrines face down in the snow. Probably fainted, maybe frozen hard to say. And someone goes to check, but not fast, not like they care more, like they're drawing straws. No one wanted. You sip water from your flask, teeth clinking against the rim, and it tastes like old leather and smoke. And it's still better than the stew. Someone asks what day it is, and no one answers because no one knows, and no one wants to admit it. And the wind picks up just enough to knock over a stack of kindling and blow half a tent loose. And 3 men scramble to hold it down like it matters. Like that tent isn't already soaked through and falling apart. And one good gust away from joining the rest of the ruined camp gear that litters the edges like battlefield debris. You pull your cloak tighter, tuck your chin, stare into the whiteout like, maybe it'll blink first like. Maybe if you just keep looking long enough, something human will come out of it. But all you see are the vague shapes of trees and the twitch of shadows and that thick, endless wall of snow falling, falling, falling. like it's never going to stop, like it's just the beginning of whatever punishment you haven't figured out you deserve yet. And still you sit still, you breathe, because what else is there to do but survive it, one frozen second at a time. You stop pretending it's going to let up by the third nightfall, if nightfall is even the right word anymore, because the sky never really darkens, just shifts from grey to darker grey, like the gods are dimming the world by degrees. And now the snow's so high it's lapping at the tops of the supply crates and swallowing the firewood faster than anyone can chop it. And the cold has crept in past the clothes, past the skin, past the bones curling into the marrow of you, making itself at home. And it doesn't leave, not even when you're right beside the flames, not even when your boots are smoking from being too close to the coals, not even when someone throws on dried moss and the whole pit flares up bright enough to cast long flickering shadows that dance across faces like ghosts trying to wear your skin. You're tired in a way. You can't explain, not just sleepy, but hollow, like every step costs more than it used to, like your muscles are rationing strength the way the quartermaster rations, barley, tight-fisted and spiteful. And every time you try to sleep, your body forgets how. Keeps flinching awake at the sound of the wind clawing at the walls, or the sudden snap of a branch under snow, or the quiet, choked coughing of someone dying, too slow to be merciful and too fast to be ignored. There are fewer voices now, and not because anyone left the camp just doesn't talk the same way anymore. Not since the second man collapsed and didn't get back up. Not since the priest stopped preaching and started muttering to the fire instead, whispering things in that old dead tongue that sounds more like grinding stone than words. And you've caught a few people watching him too long, too close, eyes shiny with fear or faith, or maybe both, and you keep your distance, not because you're smart, but because your gut tells you whatever's going on there, you don't want it on your hands. Someone went missing last night, and no one said a word. His cloak was found at the edge of camp, half buried, half torn. But nobody called it what it looked like because saying wolf means fear, and fear spreads faster than frostbite. And the Jarl's been cracking down harder than usual, snapping at everyone, beating a man bloody for losing a hatchet, and now no one makes eye contact unless they have to. You go on latrine duty that night, which is a death sentence if you're not careful, because the trench is nearly buried. And if you stray too far from the torchlight, you'll walk straight into a snowdrift and disappear, and no one's going to dig for you. Not because they're cruel, but because they're cold and exhausted, and can barely keep themselves standing. You go fast, head down, eyes squinting through the white-out steam rising from every breath, like your soul's trying to escape. And when you make it back, your hands are useless clubs of meat, stiff and red, and you have to sit by the fire for 15 minutes before your fingers twitch again. Someone hands you a bit of flatbread stale and hard as bark, but you chew it anyway, soak it in broth, swallow it like punishment, and try not to think about how your body's eating itself faster than you can feed it. You haven't felt full in weeks. You haven't felt warm in longer. You haven't laughed since the first snowfall. There's a low thumping sound in your ears all the time now, like your heartbeat or a distant drum, or maybe just the noise your brain makes when it's trying to remind you that something's wrong. Something is deeply cosmically wrong, and no one's naming it. No one's daring to point and say it out loud, because that would make it real, and reality out here has teeth. You lie down eventually, back inside your half-frozen tent boots, still on, because if you take them off, you might not have the strength to put them back, and you curl up around your own body like it's the only shelter you've got left. And you listen to the wind press against the hides, like it's trying to find a way in, and you feel the cold reaching for you with soft, patient fingers. Not vicious, not cruel, just persistent, like it's been waiting its turn, and maybe tonight's the night it gets it. You wake up chewing on your own tongue, not out of hunger, but because your jaw locked tight in the cold, and your body's forgotten how to relax, even in sleep. And when you blink the frost off your lashes and shift under the half-frozen cloak, encrusted in your own breath. You're already too aware of how bad the day's going to be, because the air feels thicker, not with snow this time, but with silence, like the kind that settles right before something goes wrong and your gut's not screaming yet, but it's definitely whispering, and that's usually worse. You push yourself upright, everything stiff and slow, and try to stretch out the aches, but your shoulders just pop like old timber, and your neck cracks loud enough to make the guy next to you grunt without opening his eyes, probably assuming you're dead or about to be, and honestly, either seems fair. Outside the tent, it's all grey and white. The snow not falling now, but hanging in the air like it's thinking about it. And the sky has that pale, bruised look that doesn't promise anything good. You walk toward the cook fire out of habit, more than hunger, because you know the routine by now. Know how to make your movements slow enough that they don't attract attention, but not so slow that someone thinks you're slacking. And the lines already forming, figures shuffling like ghosts. Hands tucked into sleeves, faces blank with exhaustion and cold, and a low burn dread nobody wants to name. The stew, if you can still call it that, is down to whatever root vegetables haven't frozen solid, and the bits of dried meat that probably used to be rat or squirrel or worse. And when you ladle it into your bowl, it sloshes like mud, thick and gritty, and you choke down 3 mouthfuls before deciding you're full enough to fake it, and set the bowl down beside your boots, letting the rest congeal in peace. The Jarl hasn't shown himself yet this morning, which is strange enough to make people look around more than usual. But nobody says it. Just eyes flicking to his tent, waiting for a roar or a command or the thud of something being thrown. Instead, it's the quartermaster, who starts barking loud and agitated, holding up a splintered food crate and yelling about someone stealing supplies. And suddenly, every head is up, every conversation dies and the air sharpens. You keep your expression flat, keep your hands visible, keep your feet planted, because the last thing you need right now is to look guilty, just for breathing. They drag one of the younger thralls forward, skinny and shaking and barely old enough to grow a beard, and you already know he didn't do it. He's too scared to steal, too broken to even think about it. But someone's got to take the blame. And today, it's him, and the Jarl finally appears like a storm on legs, eyes bloodshot and mouth set like a blade. And it's over in 3 sentences, no trial, no argument, just a fist to the kid's face, a kick to the ribs, and then 2 men dragging him by the ankles out of sight, while everyone else goes back to pretending nothing happened. You wipe your mouth, toss your crust of bread to the fire, and try not to taste guilt. The rest of the morning is spent hauling water, which means breaking through fresh ice and spilling half of it on your boots, and the chill works its way through the leather until you can't feel your toes again. But you keep going because stopping means freezing, and freezing means dying. And dying here means being forgotten before the snow even covers you. You find yourself watching the horizon more than usual, not because you expect anything, but because the woods are too quiet. No birds, no rustling, just stillness, like the world is holding its breath. And when someone jokes that the gods have abandoned you all, nobody laughs. You eat again at midday, though the portions are smaller and the salt's been cut back to nothing. And everything tastes like boiled regret. And when the priest shows up later in the afternoon to burn some herbs and mumble into the smoke, even the men who usually roll their eyes stay quiet because nobody wants to test fate. This deep into winter, not when your ribs show through your tunic and your dreams are starting to repeat themselves and you keep waking up convinced someone's standing over you. That night, you help patch a section of the palisade that's starting to lean, the posts rotting under the snowpack. And as you hammer the supports back into place with fingers too numb to grip properly, you glance back toward camp and see the lights flickering, like they're being tugged by something beneath the snow. And it makes your stomach drop, even though you don't know why. Just one of those feelings that digs into your spine and won't let go. When the work's done and the fires are low again, and you curl into your cloak on your same damp patch of straw, You close your eyes and try not to think about how many days it's been, or how much food is left, or how many bodies are buried just outside the palisade under those perfect undisturbed mounds of white. Because you know the answer to all of that is less than enough. You wake up to the sound of someone dry heaving just outside your tent, a wet choking rhythm that snaps you out of sleep with the same sudden panic as a scream. And for a moment you lie there, not moving, just listening, because there's always that half second when your brain tries to decide if this is something you need to deal with, or if you can pretend it's not your problem and roll over. But the gagging doesn't stop, and neither does the muffled crying that follows it. So you sit up slowly, every joint, catching every muscle tight, every breath frosting out in front of your face. And when you pull back the flap, you see one of the older warriors hunched over on his knees, arms wrapped around his stomach like he's trying to hold something in or hold himself together. Nobody's helping him. 2 men pass by without a word, one even stepping around the puddle of sick like it's a puddle of rainwater and not someone's body giving up. And you stand there watching cold biting into your shins until the man finally slumps forward into the snow and just stays there, not moving, not moaning, not breathing in any way that matters. And when you step closer, you already know he's gone. The snow soaks through the fabric of his cloak in seconds, turning dark and slushy around his shoulders. And you kneel beside him and press your fingers to his neck just because someone should. Because he deserves more than to be passed over like trash. But all you feel is stillness, no pulse, no heat. Just a body cooling in a world already too cold. Someone finally comes to help, not out of kindness, but to drag him away before the Jarl sees and makes a spectacle of it. Because dead men are a morale problem. And morale is a slippery thing in a camp already hanging on by its fingernails. You don't even know the man's name. You try to remember if he ever told you a story, or shared a laugh, or even looked you in the eye, but nothing sticks. And that might be worse than the death itself. They bury him shallow and fast. No rites, just a few muttered words and a shove of snow. And then it's back to routine, back to splitting kindling and boiling broth, and pretending it's normal that people are dying in silence now. The stew that afternoon is thinner than ever. Just cloudy water, with a few grey flecks drifting near the bottom like dust. And when you bring it to your lips, your body shivers even before the cold hits your tongue. Not from temperature, but from recognition. Like your stomach already knows this won't help. You eat it anyway. You always do. You sit near the fire, but it barely warms you anymore. The flames small and reluctant, and too spread out to touch anything deeper than your fingers. And around you, the others huddle like animals. Not talking, not moving, just blinking slow and breathing slow and staring into the coals, like the fire might tell them something. The sky refuses to. Someone tries to start a song, just a short verse, something old and worn, but their voice cracks halfway through the first line, and they stop embarrassed, and the silence afterward is louder than the song ever was. The Jarl hasn't been seen since morning, and rumours are starting to drift through the tents like smoke. Some say he's sick, some say he's gone mad, some say he's planning to abandon the camp and run with whoever's strong enough to follow. You try not to believe any of it, but your gut is tight, and your instincts haven't been wrong yet. You're sent to check the western trapline before sunset, and the walk out there is slow snow up to your knees and sky so low it feels like it's pressing on your skull. And when you reach the first snare, there's nothing in it, just broken twine and trampled snow, and the next one's been torn clean through. No sign of the rabbit that should have been there, and the third one's just gone. You kneel down, touch the prints in the snow, too big for a fox, too shallow for a wolf. And something about them feels off, like whatever made them wasn't walking so much as dragging itself, like it didn't care who saw or where it left its trail. You follow it for a minute, not far, just enough to see that it leads into the trees, where the branches twist low and black and wrong. And then you stop, because something about the silence here feels heavier than the rest of the world. And you turn around, and walk back without looking over your shoulder, because you don't want to know what's behind you. Not today. When you return to camp, they don't even ask what you found. Just hand you a cup of melted snow and wave you toward the fire like another warm body is enough. You drink it, wipe your mouth, and sit there until the sky darkens and the fire dies again, and nobody moves, like the whole camp has decided to go still, until the snow gives up, or the earth opens, or something breaks that isn't just another human being. You lose track of time again, not because you're tired though. You are deeply, endlessly, but because time here doesn't move in straight lines anymore. It drips and loops and folds over itself, like the way snow covers landmarks until even the familiar looks foreign. And now you can't tell if it's evening or morning, or just some long stretch of grey in between. And you stop asking because the answer doesn't matter. Not when every day starts and ends, the same with a cold that cuts deeper, and food that stretches thinner, and silence. That's starting to feel like language. You try to stay busy because stillness is dangerous. It lets the thoughts in the memories and doubts and bad ideas. And so you find something to do, anything, a blade that needs sharpening, even though it's already sharp, a cloak that needs mending, even if you don't have the thread, the kind of tasks that feel useful even if they're not. And around you, others do the same, clinging to repetition like it's religion, heads down, hands working, pretending that keeping busy is the same as keeping alive. Someone dies again quietly, this time in their sleep. If you believe the story though, the way they're carried out by the ankles, makes you wonder if it was really that peaceful. And there's no burial. Not today, just a pile of snow in the far corner of the camp, and a promise to do it later, which everyone knows is a lie, but no one questions it. You can't remember the last name you said out loud. You can't remember the last time someone said yours. The Jarl reappears sometime in the middle of what must be afternoon, looking thinner, sharper, like a statue that's been whittled down by the wind. And he doesn't speak at first, just paces the fire circle, boots crunching over packed snow, and then, without warning, he slams his axe into the ground and tells everyone that rations are being halved again, and no one argues because what would be the point? And someone near the back laughs. Not because it's funny, but because they finally crossed that invisible line where the absurd turns familiar, and the sound of it echoes too loud and doesn't get repeated. You eat your portion slowly, chew every bite like it's made of gold, and stare at the fire like it might offer answers. But it only flickers and hisses and throws sparks into the air that vanish before they land, and you wonder if that's what's going to happen to you. If you'll vanish before anyone notices you're missing just another spark in a camp that doesn't remember where the warmth used to come from. Later, when most of the bodies have curled back into their tents, or drifted into that half-sleep that doesn't heal you, sit near the perimeter and watch the trees, because it's easier than facing the firelight, easier than looking at the faces that used to be people and are now just shapes under cloaks, easier than wondering which of you is next. The woods don't move, not really, but they feel like they're breathing, like something out there is watching, just like you're watching, and you grip your spear tighter even though you're not sure your fingers would close properly around it. If anything did happen, and you tell yourself it's fine, that you're just tired, just stretched thin, just reading into nothing, but your gut has its own language, and right now it's shouting. Someone comes to relieve you. After a while, a kid barely old enough to swing a weapon, and he nods without a word and takes your spot. And you almost warn him, almost say something about the trees and the way the shadows are falling wrong, but you don't, because if he doesn't already feel it, then nothing you say will matter. You crawl back into your tent and sit there for a long time before lying down, cloak pulled up to your chin boots still on, and you listen. Not for danger, not exactly, but for anything at all. Any sound that doesn't belong to the wind or the bones of the camp, groaning under the weight of its own despair. But all you hear is that same old hush, thick and endless, like the snow has buried the world and no one bothered to dig it out. You close your eyes and tell yourself tomorrow will be different, not better, just different, and even that feels like too much to hope for. You're woken by a sound that doesn't belong to this camp, a sound that cuts through the usual shuffle of snow and groan of frozen wood, and low murmurs of half-dead men, and makes your whole body go still, in the way animals do when they know something bigger just entered the clearing. And at first, it's hard to place just a thud, distant and slow but steady, like a drum buried under snow, like footsteps that know. They don't need to hurry because whatever's coming is inevitable. And you sit up so fast your spine protests, your breath puffing out in hard little clouds as your ears strain to catch it again. But it's already gone, swallowed by wind or memory or both. And maybe you imagined it. Maybe it was just a dream leaking into waking. But the feeling it left behind is real and sour and settles in your gut like a bad meal. You crawl out of the tent boots. Stiff fingers, stiff face, stiff. The kind of cold that doesn't sting anymore, but just seeps in like water into old wood. And the sky is still that same endless grey. The snow coming down like ash, and the fire pits are barely alive this morning. Nobody talking, nobody moving unless they have to. And you almost turn back, almost dive back into the small familiar misery of your bedroll. But then you see them tracks in the snow, big ones, not boot prints, not animal, something wider, something off the edges, too smooth, too deep, like something heavy dragged itself through. And your breath catches as you follow them to the edge of camp, where they vanish into the trees, not scattered, not lost, just stopped, like the forest swallowed them whole. The Jarl is already there, arms crossed, jaw tight, staring at the place where the tracks disappear like he's trying to burn a hole through it with his eyes. And when he speaks, it's low and sharp, says it's a bear, says it's nothing, says get back to work, and nobody contradicts him. But nobody believes him either. Not really. Not with the way his eyes won't stop scanning the tree line. You're sent to reinforce the palisade again, which now leans in places like it's tired too, like the camp itself wants to give up. And you work with numb fingers and splintered planks and knots that won't pull tight. And all the while you keep glancing back at the woods, and every time the wind rises, you think you hear that thudding again, faint and slow, and too rhythmic to be natural. But there's nothing there, just snow and branches, and that awful heavy silence. By midday, another man is missing, one of the ones who went to check the stream for ice fishing. And nobody talks about it directly, but everyone feels it like static in the air, like the pause before lightning, and you catch snippets of conversation between the younger ones. Stories half remembered from childhood, about spirits in the snow, old things that wake when the land gets too quiet. And the people forget the right prayers, and even the ones who scoff do it with eyes that flick to the shadows too often. The priest doesn't speak all day. He sits by the fire carving something into the flat of a broken shield, something with too many angles and not enough logic. And when someone asks him what it is, he just says a door without looking up and goes back to carving. You don't ask. You don't want to know. You eat dinner in silence, watery broth with something rubbery floating in it. And every bite takes effort, not because it tastes bad, though it does, but because it's hard to focus on anything other than the feeling that something is circling just outside the light, not watching you exactly, but waiting for you to break the line to take one step too far from the fire. That night, you take first watch and the Jarl stations 2 more along the perimeter, which is unusual, and nobody mentions the man who didn't come back. Nobody says the word missing, they just say gone. Like the difference between the two is some kind of comfort. The trees don't move, but they feel closer than yesterday, their black arms reaching out under the weight of snow. And every time the wind shifts, you catch a smell that's wrong iron and rot, and something older, like damp stone, like breath from a mouth too big to belong to any man. You don't sleep. Not when your shift ends. Not when you crawl back under your cloak. Not even when your body begs for it because your mind is too full of footsteps that don't fade and woods that whisper, and the quiet certainty that something's coming. And when it does, it won't knock. You keep your eyes open even when they burn, even when the wind lashes your face and your lashes freeze together, and your knees lock up from standing too long in one place because blinking feels like giving ground. And you've got this stupid, stubborn idea in your head that maybe if you just keep watching the trees, whatever's in there will stay out, like your gaze is a wall. It can't cross, even though deep down you know better. Know that if something wants in, it's already here. It's already under the snow, in the bones of the camp, in the way the others don't talk anymore, don't look at each other for too long, as if they're afraid of what might look back. You see it in the eyes of the Jarl, who hasn't shouted all day, hasn't cursed or thrown anything, just walks the camp with that slow, deliberate pacing of someone listening for something nobody else can hear, and the priest doesn't even pretend anymore. He's built a ring of ash and stone around his tent and lines it with bones and burned twigs and symbols. He scratches into the snow with a stick that might have once been a finger, and the rest of the camp lets him steps wide around him, because no one has the energy to argue with madness, when it might be the only kind of sense left. You're put on watch again, not because you're trusted, not because you volunteered, but because your name got picked and nobody argued and you're too tired to protest, too cold to fake sickness. So you go back to the edge of the woods, where the snow is waist high and the torches burn low and slow, like they're scared too, and you dig yourself a place to stand, shield your face from the wind, and try not to stare too hard at the places where the tree line doesn't quite look the same anymore, where the shapes don't move but also don't feel still, like they're waiting for you to blink. The kid next to you says he heard something last night, says he saw a face in the trees, but when you press him, he shuts down, looks away, mumbles that maybe it was a dream, maybe it was nothing, and you let it go because you know the shape of that fear too well. And if he puts it into words, it might make it real. Later, back at the fire pit, the talk has shifted from food to warmth to survival, to how long the meat will last if the hunting parties keep coming back empty. And no one says it outright, but you feel it coming, that edge of desperation, where the rules start to slide, where practicality starts to look like horror from the outside. But inside the circle, it just sounds like math, and you wrap your hands tighter around your bowl and try not to taste the thought. The snow's changed texture now, not just falling, but drifting sideways, whipped by a wind that isn't constant, but comes in pulses like breath, and it makes the tents flap and the trees creak. And every sound you hear gets eaten up by it before you can tell what it was. That night, someone screams, not loud, not long, just one sharp sudden cry that gets cut off halfway, and everyone freezes, spoons mid-air, eyes wide. And then the Jarl's shouting for scouts and torches, and half the camp surges toward the sound, while the rest pretend not to shake. And you're caught in the middle, not sure whether to run or dig deeper into your furs. And in the end you go, because you can't stand the not knowing, and your feet crunch over snow that's been flattened by too many panicked boots and stained, just dark enough to know. The scream didn't lie. You find a hand sticking out from under a snowbank, just the fingers pale and stiff and bent, like they were reaching for something, and there's no sign of the rest of the body, just drag marks that stop halfway into the woods, like whatever took him didn't care to hide it anymore. The Jarl says wolves again, says it like he believes it this time, says it loud enough that some of the others start nodding because it's easier than silence, easier than the priest's mutterings, easier than the shapes in the trees and the whispers in the wind. You go back to your spot by the fire and sit without eating, without speaking, just watching the flames flicker and listening for that sound again, that slow, deep thudding that isn't footsteps, but always feels like one more step closer. And you pull your cloak around you like armor and tell yourself it's still just weather, just bad luck, just cold and exhaustion and fear twisting your senses. But you keep your spear close, And you don't sleep. You don't even try. You don't talk much anymore. None of you do, because words feel brittle in the cold. And no one wants to say the wrong thing and break whatever thin layer of sanity still clings to this place. So you just move through the day like you're underwater. Everything's slowed down and muffled and heavier than it should be. And the silence has started to feel more natural than noise, like your voice might betray you if you use it too long. Like the trees are listening, and they're getting closer. And maybe they remember names, even if you don't speak them out loud. You sharpen tools that won't be used, reinforce a wall that's already leaning too far, haul buckets of ice to melt into water you barely need because your throat is too tight to swallow. And you pretend it matters because if you don't keep moving, your mind goes where you don't want it to. Back to the missing, back to the tracks, back to that sound that you still haven't heard again, but can't stop imagining, low and steady, like something breathing slow just to savor the wait. The Jarl calls a meeting at dusk. Not all of you, just a few fighters, scouts, anyone who still looks alive enough to swing a weapon. And you're pulled into the group without a word, standing shoulder to shoulder in a half circle of men who smell like smoke and fear and leather stiff with blood. And the Jarl talks low and fast, says a search party is going out at dawn, says it's time to take the fight to whatever's been picking them off, says, enough is enough. And all the usual lines, and you nod like the others. But something cold settles under your ribs when he says, it's not just wolves anymore, not just bad luck. And he doesn't say what he really means, but everyone hears it anyway. You're handed fresh gear if rusted spears and patched cloaks count as fresh and told to sleep while you can. And so you walk back to your tent, legs dragging snow, crunching beneath you, like the world cracking open under your weight. And the air feels wrong again, not colder, but emptier, like something's been taken away and you can't figure out what. You duck into the tent and sit there in the dark for a long time before lying down, eyes wide open, listening to the creak of the wind through the bones of the camp, and the occasional distant shuffle that could be a man or an animal or neither. And when you finally drift off, it's not sleep exactly, just a slide into somewhere quieter, where your body gives out, but your brain keeps watch. In your dream, you're walking through the trees barefoot and bleeding the snow red under your feet, and the sky low enough to touch. And something follows behind you but never catches up, always just far enough to make you turn your head, but never far enough to let you rest. You wake up gasping, covered in sweat that freezes the second it hits the air, and the sun is barely rising, more of a dim suggestion than a light. And the men gathered outside are already silent, already packed, already ready for whatever this day is about to be. You eat a crust of bread that tastes like rope, sip water that tastes like smoke, and follow the Jarl into the trees with your weapon in hand, and your eyes too wide, too dry, and every step deeper into the woods feels like a question you don't want answered. The snow gets quieter out here somehow, softer, and the deeper you go, the more it feels like you're walking into a mouth branches closing above like teeth, the light thinning out until it's just you and your breath and the crunch of your boots and the sound of the man behind you murmuring a prayer. He probably doesn't believe anymore. You find another track too big, too clean, and the Jarl curses under his breath and raises a hand, and you all fan out like that's going to help. Like a wider formation will keep the shadows from closing in. One man disappears between two trees and doesn't come back out. You call for him, and there's no answer. Just that quiet, that same heavy hush. And the Jarl says, press on, eyes hard, voice low. And nobody argues because nobody wants to be the one left behind. Hours pass, or maybe it's minutes, hard to tell. And then the smell hits you, wet fur and rot, and something older like burned hair and stone and cave. And your stomach turns, even though it's empty, and you grip your weapon tighter. Knuckles white, shoulders tight, because whatever's ahead isn't natural, isn't something you can kill with an axe or drive off with fire. You hear breathing, not yours, not the Jarl's, something bigger, slower behind the next rise. And when you crest it, the ground is torn up like a wound. Trees snapped and scattered like toys. Snow soaked through with old blood. And there's something there, just at the edge of vision, too tall, too still, watching. You blink and it's gone. But the mark it leaves in your chest doesn't fade. And when the Jarl turns to say something to rally or order or lie, the sound that comes out of the woods swallows his voice whole. And you all freeze rooted, like the trees waiting for the answer you didn't want, but always knew was coming. You don't remember running, only that your breath tore itself out of your lungs, and your legs moved like they belonged to someone desperate and stronger and dumber than you, and that the forest spun sideways with each step, trees lunging past like they were trying to stop you, like they wanted to grab your cloak and drag you down into the red snow, and whatever was waiting underneath it. But somehow you made it back, or at least your body did, because you don't feel like you came back whole. Not after what you saw, not after that sound, that horrible low vibration that wasn't a roar or a growl or a voice, but all three at once. A sound so wide it didn't just ring in your ears, it spread through your chest like ice water, like it was trying to hollow you out from the inside. And now, even though the trees are behind you and the camp is ahead, lit with its trembling fires and slumped tents, and silent people, that sound is still inside you, echoing low and endless, like it left a part of itself lodged in your bones. Nobody asks what happened. Nobody dares. When the Jarl staggers through the palisade with blood down his face and no one behind him. The crowd parts like a cut and lets him fall to his knees in the mud without a word, and when he finally speaks, it's not a command or a curse or a prayer. It's just, don't go back. And then he passes out, and the silence that follows is thicker than the snow. They pull him to his tent call for the priest, who doesn't come, who hasn't spoken since before dawn, and someone says he's been locked inside, chanting in a language no one knows, drawing in soot and ash on the hide walls. And no one's been brave or stupid enough to interrupt. You sink into the nearest patch of ground and sit there for a long time, not shivering anymore because the cold isn't outside you now. It's inside, settled deep like rot in timber, and you realize you haven't taken a full breath in hours. Someone passes you a flask and you drink without tasting liquid fire down your throat. And it doesn't help, but you do it again anyway, because what else is there to do now? Really, the men who stayed behind don't ask who didn't come back. They already know. It's in the way they sit quieter, how they eat slower, how they glance at the trees with the same look you've seen animals give before they bolt. That night, no one sleeps. Not because of nightmares, though. There are those too. But because the wind has started to talk. It doesn't whistle anymore. It mutters, it sings long broken syllables that don't sound human, don't sound right. And even when you cover your ears, you can still feel them behind your eyes, like someone whispering from inside your skull. One of the men tries to leave. He says he's going to find a warmer camp down the valley. Says he has cousins in the south. Says he'll be back with help. But he doesn't make it to the gate before the snow starts falling again, thicker this time, faster. Not drifting like before, but slamming down in sheets. And he disappears into it like a drop of ink in water. And you all just watch. No one follows. No one even says goodbye. The next morning, his boots are found outside the priest's tent, frozen solid, perfectly upright. No feet inside them. No tracks leading back. The Jarl wakes up long enough to try saying something. Maybe an order, maybe a warning. But all that comes out is a cough full of blood, and a look in his eyes like he's already gone somewhere else, and no one has the strength to carry him this time. You gather around the fire not for warmth, but for proof that fire still burns, that something still makes sense. And someone starts reciting the names of the dead, not out of respect, but as a kind of shield. Like if you name them fast enough, loud enough, it'll keep them from coming back different. The priest finally emerges, robes black with soot, eyes red from smoke or something worse. And he walks into the center of camp without a word, drops a bundle wrapped in furs onto the snow, and unwraps it to reveal bones, not animal, not whole, just shards and fragments painted with symbols no one recognizes. And he says only this: it knows we're afraid. It likes that. And then he sits beside the bones and doesn't move again. That evening, something scratches at the outside of your tent. Just once. Slow, deliberate. Not wind, not a branch. Just long enough to remind you that the trees aren't done. Not yet. You don't open the flap when the scratching stops. You don't move at all, because whatever was out there knew exactly where your tent was. Knew exactly how long to drag its claws to make your skin crawl, and your heart stutter, and your breath catch in your throat like a snared animal. And now that it's gone, or seems like it's gone, you just lie there, eyes wide open in the dark, every inch of your body listening, waiting, braced for a second sound that doesn't come. And somehow, that silence is worse. The absence of proof making you doubt whether it really happened, or if your mind is finally starting to eat itself, and you stay that way until your legs go numb, and the dawn light seeps through the seams of the tent, like the sky giving up on the night. You crawl out slowly, carefully, like the snow might still be hiding something under its skin. And when you step outside, there's nothing. Just the usual grey-white sprawl of the camp, the sagging tents, the dead fires, the exhausted ghosts of men moving like they've forgotten how to walk without dragging their feet. And you look for tracks, but the snow is smooth, untouched, like it healed itself overnight, like whatever was out there didn't need to leave a trail. The priest is still sitting by the bones, unmoving lips moving soundlessly, eyes locked on something that no one else can see. And people are giving him an even wider berth than before, which means whatever they used to think about him has curdled into something closer to fear. Because now he's not just the man with answers. They think he might be the reason there are questions at all. The Jarl hasn't been seen since yesterday, and someone mutters that he's gone wandered off in the dark, or slipped out through the trees, or maybe just died quietly in his sleep. And no one had the energy to notice. No one volunteers to go check. You're told to gather firewood, not because there's much left to burn, but because people need something to do, some piece of purpose to hang on to. And so, you take the hatchet and walk out toward the edge of the woods, boots crunching through crusted snow, eyes darting every direction, even though there's nothing to see but the same empty trees that have always been there, tall and silent, and now somehow feeling taller and more silent. And you find a few fallen limbs, drag them back one by one. Hands raw against the bark, shoulders burning, but it helps a little to move to sweat, to pretend this is still about survival, and not whatever quiet unraveling has started threading its way through camp. Someone else joins you, a boy barely 15, face pale and tight, and you work beside each other without speaking. The kind of silence that feels like an agreement, like saying anything out loud might wake something that hasn't noticed you yet. On the last trip back, you catch movement in your peripheral vision, just a twitch, a shadow between trunks, and you stop dead. Heart in your throat, breath fogging fast, but when you look straight at it, there's nothing, just snow and bark and cold. But you feel it, that weight, that watching, like something held its breath when you turned and is still holding it now. You don't run. You just back away slowly, the boy watching you, understanding without asking, and you both walk the rest of the way in silence, not looking back. That night, the fire burns a little brighter than usual, maybe because the wood is drier, maybe because everyone crowds a little closer, as if proximity alone can make the dark feel less like a mouth waiting to close. Someone tries to tell a story, something old, something about gods or ancestors, but his voice breaks halfway through and he stops. And the silence that follows is thicker than before, not uncomfortable, just final, like whatever words were meant to be said here were already spent. When you lie down, your boots still on your cloak, still wrapped tight, you keep your hand on the hilt of your axe, not because it will help, but because it's heavy and real. and it keeps you anchored in the now, and you close your eyes, but you don't sleep. Not fully, just drift somewhere shallow, ears straining for sound, skin prickling with every gust of wind against the hide. And sometime before dawn, you hear it again, not scratching this time, but breathing low and long and steady, just beyond the wall of your tent, and you don't move. You don't even blink, because you know whatever's out there is listening too. The breathing fades with the stars dissolving into the grey dawn like it never existed, and you lie there with your eyes wide open and your fingers cramped around the haft of your axe, your jaw locked, and your heart beating so slow and loud, it feels like you're the only sound left in a world made of snow and silence and things that don't need to sleep. And when you finally move, when you finally exhale and flex your hand and sit up inside your tent, with limbs that don't feel like yours, the only thing you know for certain is that something stood outside your walls last night and chose not to come in not yet. And you can't decide if that makes you lucky or just next. Outside the camp has begun another morning that doesn't feel new, doesn't feel like anything, except a continuation of a long, slow slide into something colder and darker and more inevitable. And the sky is low and swollen with clouds, and the snow is falling again, slow and thick, soft as ash. And no one looks up because no one wants to see what's behind it. And you walk to the fire pit like you always do, because the body needs routine when the mind starts to slip. And someone hands you a ladle of thin broth without a word, and you drink it without tasting it. And across the fire, a man you don't know is staring at the woods, like he's listening to something you can't hear, and you realize his eyes aren't blinking. The priest is gone when you pass by, where he sat, just bones and soot now scattered. Like someone knocked over a shrine or something moved through, and didn't care to step around him. And no one says anything about it. No one asks, because asking means acknowledging that maybe he wasn't the one summoning anything. Maybe he was just trying to hold something back. And now that he's gone, it's free. The Jarl's tent flap is still closed, still motionless. And whether he's alive or dead or something in between, no one checks, no one leads anymore. They just move, they just do. And that's almost worse than chaos. This soft collapse, this quiet resignation. You're sent out again, this time with 2 others to scout the northern tree line, even though it's pointless. Even though everyone knows no help is coming, no escape is possible. But the body craves motion, so you go trudging through knee-deep snow. The trees folding over you like ribs. The world narrowing until it's just you and the scrape of breath and the endless white. The younger man says he heard music 2 nights ago. Flutes, or maybe windpipes, something that sounded human but came from the wrong direction, from beneath the ground or from inside the trees. And the older one tells him to shut up, but he doesn't, not really, just stops talking and starts humming. Instead, low and off-key, and you feel it again, that wrongness, like the space between the trees isn't empty, like it's holding something that doesn't want to be seen until it's too late. You find a clearing you don't remember being there before. Circular clean, no prints, no tracks, and the snow in the center isn't falling, just hovering in the air, like time stopped for that one spot. And none of you step into it. None of you say anything. You just turn around and walk back in silence. Not fast, not frantic, just steady, because whatever's out here doesn't chase it, waits. Back at camp, the fires are lower, the voices softer, the people fewer. And you don't ask who's gone, because you've stopped keeping count. And when someone says they saw a figure standing in the woods last night, just watching, tall and still and wrong, no one questions it. They just nod and check their weapons like it'll help. Like sharp steel matters when the things out there don't bleed. That night, no one volunteers for watch and no one assigns it. So you all sit around the fires like the light will do the job for you. Like the flames are enough to keep the dark from pressing in. But you feel it anyway. The cold at your back, the weight behind your tent. the breath in your ear when you turn your head too fast, and the sleep that finally takes you is shallow and cruel, full of footsteps that echo in empty places of eyes in the snow, of teeth where mouths shouldn't be. And when you wake just before dawn with your breath caught in your throat and your axe clutched to your chest, you hear nothing at first, just the wind. Then you realize the fire has gone out. Then you realize the others are gone. Then you realize the snow inside your tent has footprints in it. Just one set leading in, none leading out. You don't scream when you see the footprints because screaming feels useless now. Like lighting a match in a thunderstorm. Like trying to chase a shadow with a spear. And maybe that's what's changed the most. How fear doesn't make you loud anymore. It makes you still, makes you quiet. Makes you lie there with your breath caught in your throat and your back pressed against the cold ground, trying to convince yourself that you're not seeing what you're seeing. That the prints in the snow weren't made by something walking into your tent in the middle of the night while you slept with your axe cradled in your arms like a talisman, like a prayer. And when you finally move, it's slow, deliberate, not out of bravery, but out of the exhausted logic that if it meant to hurt you, it already would have. If it meant to take you, it wouldn't have left you here with the proof. And so you sit up cloak stiff with ice bones grinding like stones, and you stare at the single trail of prints that lead from the flap to where your fire used to be, and then stop, vanish, no drift, no disturbance. Just an end, like it was never really walking at all. You step out into the morning, or what passes for morning. Pale and dim and colourless, the camp emptier than before, not quiet from rest, but from absence. And the snow falls slow and sticky, clinging to every shape and muting every sound. And for a moment you think you're the last one left, until you see a man crouched by a post, carving something into the wood with a shaking hand. Not letters, not runes, just long looping spirals that wind in on themselves, like he's drawing a map of how his mind is unraveling. And when he sees you, he doesn't speak, just keeps carving, and you don't ask, because you don't want to know what he's drawing. You walk to the center of camp, where the fire should be, and find only blackened snow and bones, not human, not recognizable. Just scattered remains with steam curling from the sockets, and you hear something move behind you. But when you turn, it's just wind, just snow, just the ache of your body reminding you that survival doesn't mean safety. It just means one more day to feel hunted. You find a water skin that hasn't frozen yet, and drink until your teeth hurt. And then you sit by the place where the fire was, and stare into the nothing, and try to remember the names of the people who were here just days ago. But the more you try, the less you can hold on to. Like their names were written on smoke, like whatever's in these woods is chewing through memory first, before it takes the body. The sky doesn't change much, but you know the light is fading. Know the snow is falling harder, and you know you can't sleep here tonight. Not with the prints and the silence and the feeling in your gut that says you've already overstayed your welcome. You pack what's left, half a cloak, a blade with a cracked edge, the last hunk of bread so hard it could be used as a weapon, and you head out. Not with a plan, not with a direction, just away from the tents, from the fire, from the things you can't see, but can still feel. And the forest greets you like an old wound, familiar and aching, and full of things that move at the edges of vision, and you follow the faint path where your feet feel pulled, not by instinct, not by hope, but by the simple fact that standing still feels like surrender. You walk for what might be hours, might be longer, and the trees begin to close in tighter, the snow deeper, the air colder in a way that bites your bones, and not just your skin, and the world around you begins to lose shape until it's just white and grey and black. And when you finally stop, it's not because you found shelter, but because your legs give out and you fall to your knees in front of a massive stone rising from the snow like a tooth, ancient and cracked and covered in carvings. too deep to be weathered, too wide to be made by any tool you know. And you press your hand to it and feel warmth, real warmth, not fire, not flesh, something older, something waiting. You press your forehead to it without knowing why, and for a second the noise in your head stops. No wind, no breath, no thoughts, just silence. And then a voice not outside you, but inside, low and endless, and speaking in a language you don't understand, but recognize all the same. And it doesn't promise safety, doesn't offer mercy, just acknowledgement, just the cold comfort of being seen. When you finally pull away, the snow has stopped, and the woods are quiet, and you're alone, but not like before, not quite. Something followed you, or maybe something woke up, and either way, it's with you now. You don't speak the language, the stone spoke to you, but you understand it anyway, the same way you understand a scream, before the words take shape, or the way a wound knows when it's too deep to close. And ever since you touched it, there's been a hum under your skin, not a sound exactly, but a sensation, a pressure, like the world has shifted by one notch, and you're the only one standing where the light hits wrong. And now, every step feels different, heavier, not with fear, but with knowing. Like your feet aren't just carrying your weight anymore, but something else, something that's using your legs because it has nowhere else to go. The forest feels less like a place and more like a mouth now, not swallowing you, but tasting you. Every tree leaning a little too close, every shadow staying a little too long, and when you walk, the snow doesn't crunch the way it used to. It sighs like the ground itself is exhaling under you, and you stop looking for a path because you realize the path is gone. It was never real, just an excuse to keep moving, and you're not even sure if you're going forward or in circles anymore. But that doesn't matter either, because forward and back don't mean much, when the thing you're walking toward is also walking toward you. You haven't eaten since yesterday, or maybe the day before, and your stomach stopped complaining hours ago, curled in on itself like a forgotten animal. And the only thing that keeps you upright now is the weight in your chest. Not hunger, not hope, just momentum. The deep muscle memory of survival, of putting one foot in front of the other. Because stopping means deciding that nothing is left, and you're not ready to decide that, not yet. Not with the way the sky keeps shifting like it's watching you. Not with the way your breath leaves your mouth in patterns you didn't choose. When you find the ruin, it's not because you were looking for it, but because it wanted to be found, a circle of black stone, sunken into the snow, half swallowed by the earth like it's trying to go back where it came from. And you stand at its edge and look down into the pit at the center. And you don't ask questions, because questions are for people who still believe in answers. And right now, you believe in only one thing, that whatever pulled you this far isn't done with you yet. The wind changes again, not louder, but deeper, and the trees lean away from the pit, like they're afraid of it, like they've seen what comes out of it before. And the hum in your bones matches the pitch of the air. And suddenly, your body doesn't feel like it belongs to you. Your arms too light, your chest too full, and for a heartbeat you swear. You can see your breath form shapes, letters, symbols that vanish before your eyes can catch them. You step into the ruin and the cold vanishes. Not warmth exactly, just an absence of chill, a neutral nothing that makes your skin tingle like it's remembering touch for the first time in weeks. And at the center of the pit, you find a stone table covered in marks too precise to be age-worn. And in the center of that table is a blade not rusted, not chipped, not old, just waiting clean and smooth and humming with the same low tone that's been in your chest since the woods began to speak. You don't pick it up right away. You don't want to, but your hand moves anyway, fingers wrapping around the hilt like they've been rehearsing this moment forever. And the second you lift it, everything stops, wind, sound, time, breath. And in that pause, you feel something shift in the world like a lock being undone. You don't know what you've done. You only know it can't be undone. When you step back out of the pit, the sky has changed again, darker now. but glowing, not with light, but with motion. Like the clouds are circling a center you can't see, and the snow starts falling in perfect spirals, slow and soundless. And in the distance, you hear something answer, not close, not yet, but awake. You don't run. You just keep walking. Because now the forest isn't the danger. You are. The blade in your hand doesn't weigh much, but it feels like it should, like it ought to drag your arm to the ground or sing in the air with some kind of divine force, but it doesn't. It just sits there solid and still and quiet, like it doesn't need to prove anything anymore. Like it already knows what it is and what it's going to do, and all it's waiting for is you to stop pretending. You're not part of this now. To stop pretending you still belong to the same weak-blooded camp that thought building a fire was enough to hold back the dark. You move through the woods, and they part for you, not like they're scared, but like they're resigned branches curling away, without snapping snow sliding off trunks without sound. And you feel the shape of something circling you, just outside the edge of sight. Not chasing, not hiding, just tracking, like it's trying to learn your rhythm before it tries your strength. And that should terrify you, used to terrify you. But now there's only that same hum in your bones, and a calm so unnatural it feels like it's being pumped into you from the grip of the blade. You don't know where you're going, but your feet do. And every step feels less like travel and more like revelation, like you're peeling back layers of something that was always here, but hidden. A truth you weren't meant to hold, but now can't let go. And the forest starts to change again, subtly. Roots twisting up from the snow like veins, bark peeling in wide strips to reveal markings beneath the kind of runes that shouldn't be written by hands and shouldn't be read by eyes. But they crawl into your mind anyway, and coil there like smoke. You pass the bones of something enormous and unfamiliar, ribs spread wide like it died mid-scream skull, half buried and lined with teeth too thin to be anything that walked on four legs, and the snow around it hasn't melted or drifted, just stopped, as if time avoids this place now. You stop for a while, not to rest, but to listen, and the sound that comes isn't the wind or birds, or even footsteps. It's breathing deep and slow and steady. Not yours, but something bigger, older. Like the world itself has lungs, and you finally found its throat. You move again past trees that lean in to whisper secrets you already know. Past shadows that mimic your movements half a second too late. And eventually the forest opens without warning, into a clearing so perfect and still, it feels staged, like something built it out of memory and superstition. And at the center is a stone pillar, cracked straight down the middle, pulsing faintly with a dull red light. Like a heartbeat slowed to a crawl, you approach without hesitation, because the part of you that was cautious got left behind somewhere in the snow, with your old voice and your old fear. And when you place the blade against the seam of the pillar, it fits, of course. It fits like it was carved for this, like it's the key. And this is the lock, and you are the hand the door has been waiting for. The moment the metal touches stone, everything stops again, wine breath time, and you feel the weight of eyes all around you. Thousands maybe, maybe none, but they see you now fully, and the pillar splits cleanly down the center and sinks into the earth without a sound, revealing a pit lined in smooth black stone and stairs that descend far too deep for anything made by men. You should be afraid. You should be questioning. But the hum inside you is louder now, deeper, almost a voice, and your feet are already moving before your mind catches up, carrying you down into the dark where the air is warmer, thicker, full of the scent of ash and iron, and something like memory. And as the last of the grey light disappears behind you, and the walls begin to breathe, you realize the dark isn't a place anymore. It's a presence, and you're inside it now. The stairs narrow the deeper you go, not in width, but in feeling. Like the stone itself is pressing in around you, like the walls are flexing to measure your shape, testing whether you belong here, whether you'll fit, and the air changes again, thicker now, warmer than it should be, but not comforting, more like the air in a blacksmith's mouth, metallic and damp, and vibrating faintly, with something you can't hear but feel. In the soft parts of your skull, and the deeper you descend, the less your feet make sound, your steps swallowed by the dark stone, like it's learning your rhythm and deciding how long it'll let you keep walking. You've lost track of time, of turns, of distance, but you don't stop. Not because you're brave, not because you're curious, but because stopping feels impossible now. Like the thing in your chest won't allow it. The hum from the blade now so fused with your pulse that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins, and you can't remember the last time you blinked or the last time you looked back, because nothing up there matters anymore. Not the camp, not the cold, not the faces or the silence or the graves that were never deep enough. At some point, the steps end and become a flat surface that stretches out in every direction. A floor so smooth it might as well be glass. But it's not reflective, not slippery. It just absorbs your footprints, vanishing behind you as if you were never there. And above you, there's no ceiling, only more blackness that feels close, even though you can't see it, like the weight of it is pressing down, but letting you pass for now, and ahead in the middle of this hollow. Nothing is a structure made of the same dark stone, but shaped differently, sharper, more deliberate, less natural and more intentional. Like it wasn't built, but summoned. You move toward it without thinking, or maybe thinking has changed. Maybe movement is thinking now. Maybe thought and action are the same thing, when your purpose is no longer in question. And when you reach the entrance, no door, no barrier, just a space shaped like a mouth. You step inside and feel the world shift behind you, like you pass through something thinner than a veil, but heavier than a wall, and the room within is lit without source, glowing faintly from the edges, from the seams in the walls, from the runes that pulse beneath your feet in patterns that don't loop, but build like a sentence being written with every step you take. And you don't try to read it, because the meaning isn't for the surface, it's for the marrow. The space narrows again into a hall that breathes around you, the walls flexing almost imperceptibly, like lungs that forgot how to rest. And at the end of the hall is a chamber that feels older than thought, a room not made for anything, with hands or eyes, but waiting all the same. And in the center is a throne carved from the same black stone, wide and tall and empty, but not abandoned, just vacated. You don't sit, you don't have to, you kneel. And the moment your knees touch the floor, the hum in your chest blooms into something more, something vast and vertical, like a voice that climbs up through your spine instead of speaking down from above. And it doesn't speak in words, but in understandings. And what it gives you isn't instruction, isn't prophecy, isn't blessing. It's memory, not yours, but inherited, passed through blood and blade through the grip of those who held this steel before you, through the eyes of creatures that walked this place when the sky was still cooling and breath had not yet been separated from shadow. And you see things now, things you were never meant to see, and they don't horrify you like they should. They comfort you, because finally, you know what you are. You are the echo of something ancient. You are the will made flesh. You are the hinge. And above you, far above, in the frozen world that forgot its gods and buried its fears in snow and fire, something stirs not because it senses you, but because it remembers. The blade in your hand grows warm again. Not hot, just awake. And the chamber dims and tightens and the voice quiets. Not gone, just waiting. And when you rise, the throne is no longer empty. It's not occupied either, but it is watching, and you are seen. You don't remember standing, only that you were kneeling. And then you weren't, like the floor let go of you, or the room exhaled and carried you to your feet. And when you look down at the blade in your hand, it no longer hums but pulses slow and deep like a heartbeat. Not your own, but somehow synced with yours anyway. And the air in the chamber has thickened, not heavy, but charged like a storm is coiled just behind the walls waiting to be invited in. And the throne in front of you hasn't moved. But its shape feels different now, more distinct, more present, less a thing carved and more a thing becoming, and you know, without knowing how that it won't speak again, because it doesn't have to, because the message has already been delivered. And now it's your turn to carry it back into the world that left this place behind, and hope never to hear from it again. You step back through the hall slower this time, aware of every echo, every shift in the stone underfoot, every rune that flickers as you pass like eyes fluttering open and watching you, with a curiosity that's deeper than judgment. And the space behind you closes as you move forward, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of a page turning. And by the time you reach the stairs again, you don't feel like someone returning you. Feel like someone arriving. The ascent is easier than it should be. Like the path has softened in recognition. Like the stone itself is helping you rise. And when you finally breach the surface, the cold doesn't hit you the way it used to. Doesn't slice or bite or bury it. Just touches like wind brushing against iron. And the sky above is no longer the blank grey it was when you left, but streaked with movement, slow turning clouds that spiral too precisely to be natural. And the snow falls straight down, even in the wind, each flake perfect and unmelting. Like time itself has been frozen to make room for what's coming. The forest greets you with silence. Not the uneasy hush of something watching, but the reverent stillness of something that remembers. And the trees no longer loom, they lean, bowing ever so slightly as you pass. And when you cross into what's left of camp, it's not with hesitation but purpose. And you find what you expect to find. Not people, not fires, not tents, but remnants. Impressions in the snow where bodies once slept and boots once stood. Tools left half buried and still warm, like the hands that held them were plucked away mid-motion. And in the center of it all, where the great fire once burned, there's only a shallow pit filled with sootless ash and something glinting at the bottom. A shard of bone or glass or maybe a tooth. And you don't touch it because it's not for you. You walk to the edge of the clearing and look out toward the tree line. And now you can see what you couldn't before, shapes moving slow and steady. Not circling, but gathering. Not hunting, but answering. Drawn to the tremor you've become, to the signal in your skin and the song in your spine. And you know, they are not friends or foes but followers, creatures bound not by loyalty, but by gravity. And now you are the weight. They orbit. The sky dims as the sun struggles to set behind clouds that no longer spin but churn. And you stand at the center of what was once a raid camp. Once a place of hunger and fire and blood, and is now a threshold, and you know that whatever's coming next is not survival, not escape, not even revenge, it's return. You came here with a name, but it no longer fits in your mouth, and the body you wear no longer feels like clothing but like armor. And when you grip the blade, you realize it no longer pulses with a heartbeat. It pulses with yours. You wait until the last light vanishes and the snow thickens and the figures in the trees step closer still in shadow, but no longer hiding. And you speak for the first time in what feels like years, a word you didn't know. You knew one syllable low and final, and the forest answers not with sound but with stillness, so absolute it feels like a held breath. And you step forward, not away from the camp but through it. Like it's the mouth of something vast and ready, and behind you, the throne stirs. You walk into the night, not like a man, but like a verdict. And the snow doesn't resist you anymore, just parts beneath your boots. Like it knows what you've become like, it recognizes it's better and lowers its head. Out of respect or fear or both, And behind you, there's nothing left of the camp, not even the bones, just a faint heat rising from the earth. Where once there were bodies and fire and screaming, and ahead of you, there is only forest. But it doesn't feel like the same forest you entered weeks ago. It doesn't close in anymore, doesn't whisper threats or hide teeth between branches. It just watches you pass like a sea watching the moon, because now you pull the tides and set the rhythm and everything. Here knows the song you hum without breath. And when the figures step out from between the trees, they don't bear weapons or claws or fear, they just fall in line. Tall and silent and strange, covered in hides and antlers and masks, too old to have been carved by men, and they don't speak. But you feel their voices in your spine, a kind of low reverence, like the sound of wind through a long hall, or blood, through a heart that's been woken by something it can't name. And you keep walking until the woods give way to stone, and the stone gives way to frostless soil, and the earth splits in front of you with no noise and no violence. Just opens like it's been waiting for this moment to return, like it's been holding its breath for 1,000 years for your feet to come back and press into it. And when the ground lowers into a wide basin surrounded by dead trees, pointing upward like broken fingers, you step down into it without hesitation, because whatever you were has ended, and whatever you are now belongs here. The figures follow you, not behind, not beside, but orbiting a slow and patient spiral of quiet submission. And when you reach the center of the hollow, there's another stone, not like the others, not dark or cracked, but pale and smooth and warm, and it hums without sound. A different note than the blade, but not in conflict. Just a harmony waiting to be resolved, and you raise your arm without meaning to blade, vertical point up, and the snow stops mid-air, every flake frozen in place, and you feel the cold, not leave, but change, become something internal, something held, and then there is light, not bright, not blinding, just enough to turn the basin gold and silver like sunrise in a dream. And in that light you see them, all of them, the ones who never made it back, the ones who froze and fell and broke and vanished, standing now just beyond the edge of the glow, not alive but not gone, watching you with the same look the trees gave you earlier, that blend of recognition and surrender, and you realize they're not waiting to be saved, they're waiting to be remembered. And you say their names not out loud, not with your mouth, but with your memory, with the weight they left in your bones. And with each name, the blade in your hand grows heavier until it's not a weapon anymore, but a story, and not your story. Not really, but one you were chosen to finish. You lower the blade, and the snow falls again, and the light fades, and the faces turn and dissolve back into the trees, satisfied or dismissed or forgiven. You don't know which, and the figures around you kneel, one by one, not in worship, but in agreement. And then they vanish too, scattered into the night, like smoke or myth. And you're alone again, in the center of a story that can't be told, only carried. And the wind moves again, but it doesn't cut this time, doesn't bite, it just brushes past like an old friend with nothing left to say. And you climb out of the hollow, without struggle, without question, and the world seems a little more still, a little more settled, not healed, not safe, but done, at least for now. And you walk until the sky begins to change, until the grey gives way to the first soft streaks of blue, and the snow underfoot becomes powder again, and the trees stop watching and just become trees. And you find a ridge that overlooks what used to be a valley, and you sit there, blade across your knees, breath fogging gently in front of you, and for the first time in longer than you can remember, you blink and nothing shifts, nothing stirs, and the stillness isn't threat anymore. It's peace, and your eyes close, not because you're tired, but because you're finally allowed to rest. And hey, that's where we'll leave you tonight. At the edge of something ancient, something finished, Something understood in a way that doesn't need words. So take a deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the quiet settle in your bones. You made it through another long, cold night. The snow can't follow you here. You're safe now. Sleep easy. Tomorrow's going to be a good day. A warm day. A day filled with learning and work. And maybe even a little light. Good night.